start.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this public hearing. This is the Nersa public hearing in relation to two applications filed by ESCOM with Nersa. The first application, where we request views of stakeholders, is the regulatory clearing account for the MYPD 3 fifth year, which is 2017-2018, for the variances or the cost incurred by ESCOM, which are higher than what was approved. And then the second application is looking at the MYPD 4 for the next 3 years. My name is Nomfundo Maseti. I am the full-time regulator member responsible for electricity and gas at Nersa. And today I am with my colleagues participating in this hearing. I'll introduce them to you. Starting on my far left, I have Mr. Kumulani Sibanda, who is the energy regulator member and the member of the electricity subcommittee at Nersa. On my immediate left, I have Mr. Mozivukile and Kize, who is the full-time regulator member, primarily responsible for petroleum pipelines at Nersa, and he's also the member of the electricity subcommittee. On my immediate right, I have Mr. Mudise, Jacob Mudise, who is the chairperson of Nersa, and he's also the member of the electricity subcommittee. On my far right, I have Mr. Christopher Foley, who is the CEO of Nersa and the member of the electricity subcommittee. We will be joined later by Mr. Yusuf Adam, who's also the member of the energy regulator, and he participates in the final decision of these kind of applications. And we are also joined by the members, external members of the regulator, participating in the committees. We have Ms. Tulisile Mashamba, who is sitting at the front desk here, right on this side of the room. All right, this public hearing was duly advertised in various newspapers. I'm not going to mention them, but it's national papers as well as provincial newspapers, to make sure that people have access to the dates of the public hearings and the venues where the hearings are going to be held. They were also announced in various provincial radio stations, and they were also posted on our social media platforms, such as our Twitter account as well as Facebook, for those who have access on the social media. The hearing today is governed by the Nersa rules for public hearings, and those rules, I'm going to summarize them to you. And one of them is that for the presenters that are going to share facts and evidence before us, they will be required to do so under oath, and presenters have been allocated 15 minutes each to do their presentations. If you request additional time, you can indicate that to the chairperson, and we can decide how much time we can add if we have space, so that you can complete your presentation. Only the members of this panel are allowed to ask questions to the presenters. However, if there is a member of the public here in the audience who would like to get clarification or would like the members of the panel to ask certain questions to the presenter, please write that question in a piece of paper and hand it over to Miss Edith here, and she will bring it to us so that we can see how we can ask that question on your behalf and clarify the issue. Should you consider certain information in your presentation to be confidential, please indicate so that we can decide whether or not we need to clear the room to hear the confidential information, and make sure that you will do so before you get to that part of your presentation. The recording of this hearing is done through the audio system, including the live streaming, and it will be the official record of this gathering. Please switch off your cell phones or put them on silent mode. We will also be indicating where the tea is going to be served as well as lunch. At this stage, I would like to request a person who's going to inform us about the evacuation procedures to come forward. The person who's going to inform us about the evacuation procedures before we start, if that person could come forward, please. Whilst we are waiting for the person, I would like to inform you that we also have interpretation services. Should you wish to use the language of your choice, the language that you feel comfortable with in expressing yourself. We have also the headphones, so you can use channel 1 for English, and for isiZulu you can use channel 2, for Sesotho is channel 3, and for Afrikaans channel 4. And the headphones will be distributed only when you indicate the need to utilize the headphones. So if you could indicate when you need the headphones, it will be brought to you. You just have to raise your hand and they will be able to bring it to you. That is Edith over there. Over to you, Sisi.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ndombi Shabalala. I'm part of the Occupational Health and Safety for Soweto Theatre. Welcome. I would like to give a few house rules and direction in case of an emergency. We have the two gentlemen, Happy No Letabo. They are both our patron attendants. They will assist us in case of an evacuation. The two exit doors that you see, they lead us to the main exits. This side will be your parking lot where you find the assembly point. This exit, this side will lead to the grass area where there is an assembly point. For people on stage, there's two doors behind me. Exit this side, there's one on my left and one on my right, and both doors lead to the classroom stage. That are both exits that will lead us again to the parking lot. Both of them will go in the same direction with it is my right at the moment. They will lead us to the parking lot where there is an assembly point. There's a brown door. If you, in case you at the back, you can exit through the brown door that will lead us to the parking lot at the back, leading us back to the parking lot that side where there's another assembly point. And please do not panic because we will have visible people. We all in black, so we will gladly assist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sisi. With respect to the presenters or the presentations today, we've got about 16 requests for presentation. We will start with ESCOM as the applicant. And I have the name of Mr. Khalid Kasim from ESCOM, who is going to do the presentation. If you could please come forward. May I also request that the cell phones must be switched off or be put on silent mode, please. All right. Mr. Kasim, may you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the facts you are going to present before this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do, Chairperson.
Please state your full name and your designation at ESCOM for the record.
Callum Casson, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you very much. So I will also do the same to your colleagues. Do you solemnly declare that the facts you are going to present before this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do, Chair.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and your designation at ESCOM.
My name is Brad Ostermans. I'm a Middle Manager in Generation Sustainability.
All right, thank you very much. I'll take the next one, please. May you please raise your right hand, sir? Do you solemnly declare that the facts you're going to present before this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do, Chair.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and your designation at ESCOM for the record.
Chair, based on the content we have, obviously there's some other questions that are not on these slides. There may be one or two other colleagues. Should I just bring them up just in case?
It would be better to do that so that we save time. And I'm hoping that then all of those will be the ones that are touching on the issues we asked previously. All right, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare that the information you're going to, let me not say information, it's facts and evidence. Do you confirm that the evidence that you're going to present before this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
Chair, yes I do.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and your designation at ESCOM.
My name is Eric Shanmugam. I'm Acting Senior General Manager for Generation Sustainability.
Thank you very much. Come put. Yes. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to present before this panel will be the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and your designation at ESCOM.
My name is Snehal Nagar and I'm a Finance Business Partner for Private Equity.
Thank you very much. Thanks. You may start, Mr. Kassim.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Chairperson, members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen. The first part of the presentation, as the Chair mentioned, will be around the regulatory clearing account for the 5th year of the multi-year price determination cycle that ended in March 2018. And what we'll be presenting today is the request from the regulatory members around information on operating costs and also in terms of ESCOM's position on its application, as well as a proposal from our side on potential liquidation when it comes to year 5 of the RCA. Chairperson, just to reiterate and highlight, the regulatory clearing account is a risk adjustment mechanism that effectively looks at what was the actual results for the financial year ended March 2018, compares it to the regulatory decision for that year, and within the methodology around the RCA items, certain items qualify to fall into the regulatory account application, which is subject to review by the regulator on the application. And we just want to also highlight that the regulator has also in the last year produced guidelines with regard to prudency and efficiency, and there are some key points that are highlighted around the prudency guidelines. In particular, I just want to mention some, like prudency looks at not only when the decision, or looks when at the time of making a decision and at the particular time, was the decision of ESCOM prudent at that particular time, not just the outcome. It also takes into account that you can't use hindsight to be used for prudency assessment. And at the end of the day, these variances come about from a point of what was the actual results and what were the key assumptions when the decision was made. through the RCA mechanism. On the cost side, it's about prudency and efficiency of those costs that we incurred compared to the decision. Chairperson, for the 5th year of the application, the main driver to our request of just over 21 billion rand was substantially into the difference between what was assumed volumes and what materialized in 2017-18. You will see that in this application, on a net basis, the amount of costs are actually resulting in a reduction from the revenue variance of 26.9 billion, leaving us with an overall balance in the RCA of 21.6 billion rand. Just to highlight some of the costs where effectively they are refunds through the mechanism, your coal costs of 2.9 billion, your open cycles of 1.1 billion, your IPPs of 1.7 billion, and in environmental levy of another 1.7 billion. And in coming further down, your demand side management and energy conservation, both adding about additional 1.1 billion refunds in the overall mechanism. Chairperson, the only point I want to highlight on this slide, we know in the decision by the regulator around years 2, 3 and 4, there is still an assessment of the seeker impact relating to information that needs to be verified and clarified and submitted to the regulator to assess that impact. So Chair, we're just making the point that over and above these line items here, our understanding there will be, when Nersa makes this decision, what that impact of the seeker relating to the 2nd, 3rd and 4th year of the RCA applications, which was submitted and the decision made. Chair, you asked us to look at the operating costs and how that compared to year 5 of the decision. What you will see on an overall basis, compared to the decision of 47.8 billion, Eskom spent effectively about 4 billion more in that window. And in terms of the methodology, over expenditure for operating costs is not remeasurable under the MYPD 3 methodology for RCA. And you will see there, Chair, that from an employee benefits, it was about slightly under 1 billion more than the decision. And then your other operating costs being about 3 billion more than the decision. The net impairment was 3.8 compared to 1.4. And then there's other income, which is also included as part of the RCA, and there was no assumption made when we made the RCA, when the MYPD 3 decision was made. That then gives you the overall impact of about 4.1 billion, which Eskom is not, based on the methodology, included in our 21 billion rand. Chair, in terms of the RCA, we were asked through these public hearings is, now that we've reviewed the RCA decision for the 3 years that was published on the 7th of December, with Eskom's application of the 21 billion change. And Chair, from our perspective, we still believe that we are compliant with the methodology in terms of how we treated the revenue, the coal burn, the seeker, and your IPP costs, based on the previous precedents of MYPD 2 and year 1 of MYPD 3 RCA. And that is why, Chair, you see that the number for the RCA presenting here is consistent with our application that we have made. The last point to close the RCA presentation today was Obviously, when the decision on the 32 billion was made, it does have a 4% impact in the first year, and it remains there for 4 years, where about the 32 billion is recovered over the 4 years. The question was asked is, what is Eskom's view on this RCA and how it potentially should be phased in? So Chair, my next slide will demonstrate from our perspective, and the real focus is on the RCA view on the period in which we believe it should be liquidated. So, Chair, just to orientate the committee and the public, there's firstly the 3 years of MYPD4's 15% application. There's the 4.4% liquidation of the 32 billion. Now, let's just be clear here. It's 4.4% next year starting April, and it doesn't change to recover the 32 billion over the 4-year horizon. And Chair, we added 2023 because it takes 4 years to recover the 32 billion. So Eskom's proposal in terms of the liquidation is based on our application of the 21 billion. Our proposal is that 21 billion be recovered between FY21 and FY23, which similarly to the 4.1% impact, it's a 2.8 in 2021. It remains in the base for those 3 years, and effectively by 2023, using a 2.8%, the 21.6 billion will be recovered. Obviously, based on the decision that the regulator would make, if the 21.6 billion is lower, then that 2.8% will accordingly reduce. So, Chair, I think the principle we're saying here, and maybe our view is, we would like that the RCAs for MYPD3 be completed and recovered by 2023, and then at least that is now closed, and then we can move on to the future applications and future RCAs. So, Chair, that's the key slides on the RCA application. If I now can move on to MYPD4. Today, Chair, we will focus on mainly we were asked to take into account the impact of the changes of what has happened on the generation performance, the sales, and how does it impact on the regulatory asset base, and effectively the overall revenue requirement. And Chair, we will demonstrate that. As what we will do, I will give a very high level initially, and both Brad and Titus will deal with the technical performance, and then I'll come back concluding and showing the changes in the revenue requirement once you've incorporated all of this. So in terms of the formula, it allows you to recover your operating costs that will be incurred and what we're forecasting for the next 3 years, and also to deal with your ability to meet your debt service commitments. Chair, the first slide is just demonstrating what was the application, the 3 years of about 763 billion that equated to an average increase of 15% for the next 3 years. Chair, so what we have done and what we'll show today is that what we've changed based on the process and the hearings, we've taken into account the impact of what the latest forecast on sales that Eskom sees, and we've discussed this at one of the previous hearings in much more detail. Effectively, we see a reduction from what was assumed in the original application, and then we deal with the regulatory asset-based impact in terms of which stations can operate in the next 3 years of the application. And obviously, as soon as you change sales and you change, in particular, the performance of the generation fleet and your assumption around when the new units of Medupi and Kusile will come online, you need to balance the supply and the demand. That ultimately comes through the production plan, and then we cost that share. What you will see, we will ask, is there any changes in costs? There are some changes in capital expenditure, but there are no changes in operating costs once we've done this exercise. So just to summarize our sales, what you will see there, maybe the best way to orientate the slide is focus on the middle column, which is the changes. And the big change there, Chair, you will see that the assumption around what export sales Eskom can get in the next 3 years has reduced. And basically, the main reasons for that is we have limited our supply to export customers based on the ability to pay. So we've reduced that load. And there was a customer who had a project earmarked when we made the application. That project cross-border has now fallen off. So the big change has been the reduction of about 3 terawatts for export sales, and there's been some changes from a standard tariff sales category as well. And effectively, Chair, maybe as an absolute number, you will see that by 2020 the overall terawatts drops from just about 215 terawatts to about 211, and by the last year we dropped from 218 to 212. So overall, over the 3-year horizon, about a 6 terawatt drop in sales volumes. Chair, we were asked to deal with the issue of your generation assets and which units can produce electricity in the horizon in terms of the regulatory asset base, used and usable within 12 months. And we've presented this, if I recall, at Nelspruit, where we've adjusted and changed for about 10 units at the start of the 3-year horizon, and these units are mainly attributable to the Grootvlei, Indrina and Komati power stations. We've also taken into account Dube Unit 3, and over the 3 years of the MYPD 4, additional units also come off in terms of production, and we basically at the end of this window left with 2 units from those 3 stations, and Brad will go into much more detail on that. Chair, just graphically, that's just showing when the units are basically put into reserve storage. For example, Unit 1 of Indrina in FY18, 160 and so forth. But Brad will then explain a bit more around this. They will now do the generation performance as well as on maintenance, etc. Titus, and then Chair, I will come back and close and show what does it mean in terms of the revenue requirement. Thank you.
Good morning. So just to recap where generation fits in the value chain. Alright, so that's where we produce and generate electricity. Just a recap of where the stations are in South Africa and what stations Eskom operates. To put it into context, I think it's important to note that we have an aging fleet. And if you take only the coal stations or all the stations, half of them are older than 37 years. And that's past its midlife time where significant refurbishment is required to keep the stations operating at optimal performance. We were asked to go into some more detail on benchmarks. So from a technical side point of view, the benchmarks we compare ourselves to is VGB. It's a European-based utility association, and the units we compare ourselves to, you can see that over this period from 2000 when we evolved, the availability as measured by EAF of the generation fleet has been consistently better than the benchmark. As you'll see, Eskom units are the dotted line, and the VGB benchmark is the solid line, and those are the top quartile, the middle quartile, and the bottom quartile. So until that is to around 2000 or so, and that shaded area, and from there the generation performance started to decline. We'll talk about that more later. Now, one of the impacting factors of that is our unavailability, our forced losses. And similarly to the availability, these are very good compared to the benchmark. As you will see, the dotted lines are lower than the solid lines for most of this period until the shaded area where performance did decline. It's also interesting to note that, as with the EAF, the overall trend is declining in terms of the EAF and increasing in terms of the unplanned losses or UCLF. And this is consistent with an aging fleet because our peers are also aging with minimal new plant being brought online. Okay. Now, in terms of our maintenance, this one we can see that yet again we have performed less planned maintenance over most of the period compared to our peers. And this is pretty much consistent with the constrained period we've had around about here, the constrained system, and also certain financial decisions and constraints. Until, again, the shaded area where we needed to catch up. We spent a lot more money, we did more PCLF, and that was one of the chief contributing factor to the performance improvement we saw in these years here. But again, in the last year, due to our constraints, we have again decreased maintenance spend and time during maintenance. Now, the key factor here is that throughout this period, so over more than 15 years, we have been consistently running our units much harder than the benchmark, than anybody else. In fact, even in these last few years in this area here, you can see even our bottom quartile, that's the lowest dotted line, is much higher than the hardest running quartile of the benchmarking stations. So I really want to emphasize that it's not just over a shorter period, so over an extended period, over a decade where we're running these plant hard. The decline here is partly due to sales, but mostly due to the improved availability of the fleet in the last year. Here's another indication of our performance, how it's progressed over the years. You'll see that the availability, that's the bottom bars, has decreased as our unplanned unavailability has increased until some improvement in F17 and F18 and then another decline. You can see one of the contributing factors to that is over this period we increased our spend on maintenance. And this is consistent with the picture I showed you with the planned maintenance, the PCLF. The black line is how our total maintenance spend, and it's in real numbers so that you can see the trend, and it's measured against the right-hand y-axis. So it went up from, as you'll see down in this period here, less than 15 billion in the year, in 19 rands, to at a peak of 26 odd billion. Again, we had to decrease that, and again that is one of the contributing factors to the decline in the performance here. Right, and we're also asked to go into a bit more detail on the causes of the losses. As you'll see, we speak a lot about, we've heard a lot about outage slip and boiler tube leaks. Again, these are small compared to some of the other factors, such as our partial load losses and our full load losses. What is also important to note is that the 4 particular stations that have had the biggest contribution to unplanned losses, because they were over extended periods for various reasons. If you discount those as abnormal events, that takes off a fairly amount from our total UCLF and actually drops that, it would have dropped that from about over 15 to about 12.5%. Okay, Mr. Casson spoke about the production plan and the changes we made to that. I'd just like to reiterate that the production plan is the tool that we use to determine how much energy is generated from each power station, is required from each power station, and it also is a very important input to all our costs and expenses. As you'll see on the left-hand side, all the inputs that we require from a plant perspective. It's not just the availability, but it's also technical factors such as how low can they generate at a constant base, their cost, how quickly they can follow demand by ramping up or ramping down, and what the capacity is, obviously. But in addition to that, we need to know how much energy we need to produce overall, and for that, we need to know what the sales forecasts are. We need to know how much operating reserve to keep in case of unforeseen events, etc. And then we take off how much we get from non-Eskom supply, and that tells us how much our stations need to produce. You'll see over there. And then obviously that informs how much primary energy we need to purchase, what the costs of all of those are expected to be, and including our environmental levies, etc., etc. Now, as we noted, there were a number of assumptions there, and since the application, because of the changing environment, we've made a number of changes to our assumptions and updated our production plan. And I think some of these were mentioned by Mr. Cassie. The energy forecast has changed. He mentioned the detail on that. The generation plant availability has changed, and in this table over here we can see what our old and new assumptions are and were. In addition, the changes to the commissioning dates of the new power stations, and here's a detail of the application dates and what the changed, updated commissioning dates are. These are the latest best estimates that we've been using. In addition, the model where the optimization tool handles our OCGT stations, and that has changed. And then we've also changed how we treat the units at Grootvlei, Hendrine and Komati. Both those that have already been taken out and those that we expect to come out during the MYPD 4 period. Here's a good overview of these changes. So in the production plan that was used for the application, all the units were assumed to be available. And the optimization tool told us that we would not, from various periods within the MYPD 4 period, we would not require the units from Komati, Hendrine and Grootvlei to generate electricity. But as we've seen, due to the high uncertainties in the assumptions that were made, we did not take these out at that stage, and they were kept in reserve storage and as an insurance policy, and they still are. So in the application, there was no capex for these units, and significantly reduced operational expenditure assumed. In the changed production plan, we have taken these units out of the assumptions in the production plan, as Mr. Casson showed. So the 12 units, these ones are taken out, and they're just not available for the production planning purposes. Okay. At the same time, the units that are expected to come out, these are also assumed to come out when we expect them to come out, and they are not available in the production plan. So we also assume with our current assumptions, we think it's unlikely we can bring these units back within 12 months, which is why, as Mr. Captain stated, we've taken them out of the regulatory asset base. and at the same time not used in the production. Just to highlight that, again, obviously because they're taken out and assumed not to be used, there's no capex, but we still require some minimum amount of operational expenditure at these stations. So there's no change in the revised, in the changed assumptions from what was in the application. Okay. Right, and the results of this, the results of the changed production plan are that instead of the energy to be generated by the Eskom stations remaining roughly constant from FY18 through to FY24, there is a 3%, in fact, more than 3% decrease in energy that is produced, and that obviously relates to our sales as well. At the same time, because of the various assumptions changes, it will require additional OCGT usage. So that is, as you see in the bottom table, that is higher than what is in the application. Right. Okay. As we've been discussing, the root cause of a lot of the generation, the performance at the moment, is the historical high utilization over this extended period, which obviously was as a result of the late decision and where Eskom was allowed to build new capacity. So the knock-on effect of that is still being felt. However, there are many things we can look at. Other issues, as you'll see, some of them are also as a result of this high utilization over an extended period, but there are others as well. So this is where the 9-point recovery program that I think everybody has probably already heard of, has been in the news, etc. And these are the issues that we are looking at. And I'll ask now Dr. Status to go into one of them. Okay.
Good morning, Chairperson and members of the committee. Thank you, Brett. I really need a pointer, but I'll try my best. I'll use that one. Right, I'm going to talk about specifically Medupi Kusile, the new build program that has been very topical lately. First of all, I thought maybe I should just share with the members of the committee and you, Chairperson, and the public. This is Medupi site. Those that have not been to Medupi, this is how it looks like. Very huge, very complex. You'll see this structure right at the bottom here. This is what we call the air-cooled condenser. It's the largest in the world. You don't see the typical cooling towers that emits a lot of steam. When you go to this site, you'll actually see this structure. There are no issues with this structure. First in the world, the biggest in the world. And we're very proud about what we have done. And then of course there is a balance of plant, all the infrastructure, water treatment plant, and all the conveyance systems. What you see here, these tall structures here, it's what we call the boilers. So there's 6 boilers. Just behind the boiler here, it's where the turbines are. And again, there's 6 turbines. And this is the turbine hall where you'll typically find the turbines. I think maybe the unique feature of this facility is that the chimneys, which is the tallest structure that we have at that site, is 220 meters high. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's probably the tallest structure in Africa. So it's not Sandton City, it's actually Medupi Power Station stack, which is 220 meters. If you just want to see in comparison, right at the bottom here, it's where you see the cars that are parked. So relative to the height of that stack, it's really quite high. The point that I'm trying to raise is that it's a very complex project. It's a number of contractors that are at site. We have created quite a lot of jobs in the process. However, we do have challenges, and I'm going to talk about those challenges. And we've got plans in terms of how we're going to deal deal with those challenges. But at the same time, whilst we were building Medupi site, in parallel we were building Kusile. Kusile has got a very unique feature. You'll see the structure there in orange, which is not there at Medupi currently. It's what we call the flue gas desulfurization units or system. It's to remove the sulfur. So the emissions coming out of that stack going into the atmosphere are sulfur free at Kusile. And we intend to do something similar for Medupi as well. For Kusile, we only have one unit in commercial, what we call commercial operation. In other words, generation can now use it for revenue purposes. And at Medupi, it's only the first 3 units that are in commercial operation. Unit 6, Unit 5, and Unit 4. And the counting for Kusile is the opposite. So this is Unit 1 at Kusile. So these 2 power stations were being built at the same time. You can imagine the complexity, the planning, project management, the contractual issues, etc. So it's been a very difficult since 2006, 2007 for ESCOM as well as for the country. And we've got challenges that I'm going to talk about it now in terms of what we have to do going forward. This is where most of our challenges are. This is a boiler, so that tall structure that I showed you, this is a boiler. The boiler itself, it's about 110 meters high, and you see a human being standing right at the bottom of the boiler relative to the height of the boiler, which is 110 meters high. Let me just point out the key systems in the boiler that I'm going to talk about, Chair, towards the end of my presentation. There is a boiler itself, which is a furnace where you combust the coal, generate hot air, then it goes into your tubes and it generates steam that goes into the turbine. We've got some issues around the boiler that I'm going to talk about that we need to sort out. Then there is what we call a gas air heater. So you reheat, you heat the air before it goes into your molds to increase the efficiency of your boiler and your molds. We've got issues around that. There's 2 trains, train 1, gas air heater 1, and gas air heater 2. Then at the back of the boiler is what we call the fabric filter plant. This is where we've got bags, filter bags, to remove the particulates that are in the flue gas coming out of the boiler. We've got challenges there around the bags and the fabric filter plant, and I'm going to talk about it towards the end of my presentation. The next slide, these are now for Medupi. You recall I said there's 3 units that are already in commercial operation. It's Unit 6, if you follow the column graph, it's Unit 6 that is in bluish, then followed by Unit 5, and followed by Unit 4. And what we're depicting here in this graph is the energy availability. When we contracted our main contractors, Hitachi and Alstom, now GE, we contracted them to produce 92% of the time to produce electricity from once the units are in commercial operation. We currently, just on average, we currently, for all 3 units, averaging around, I would say around 70%. Internally, we've got a target for this power station to operate at 70, and you'll see that the 2 units, Unit 5 and Unit 4, are very close to that internal target that we have set. Unit 6 is far below, and Unit 6 was the first one to be put in commercial operation. And mainly because of the challenges that we are experiencing, which I'll talk about in the next coming slides. Then it's the unplanned, which is essentially breakdowns. You'll see that at the beginning of this year, of the financial year, current financial year, April 2018, we were doing quite well in terms of breakdowns. And then it started increasing gradually, and we're currently sitting at about, I'll say around 20 something in terms of unplanned maintenance on average. And that's mainly associated with the issues that I'm going to talk about, which we are dealing with. The results of this is that we have trips, so the units trip most of the time, but this is a norm. You know, there's nothing unusual. There may be some systems that are actually tripping more frequent than what you would typically find around the world. But for instance, if you look at the financial year 2018, the total number of trips, this is now units in commercial operations, which were, I think, were about 2 or 3 of them. And then in 2019, we added more units in commercial operation. That of course increased the number of trips. We're not happy with this number of trips, but we know exactly where the challenge is, and we've got plans, detailed plans in terms of what we need to do. We're working very closely with our contractors in terms of coming up with the solutions. Now, I'm just sharing now the what I would call top 8 major issues that we are dealing with. The first one, you will see most of them are associated with the boiler that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. The first one is to do with the spray water system. So the temperatures that we expected to exit the furnace of the boiler are slightly higher than what we stipulated in our contract. As a result, there's hot gas that ends up in your tubes, and then the tubes are seeing high temperatures, so we have to spray quite a lot to reduce the temperature. So we can protect the boiler as well as protect the turbine. So there are issues around the furnace exit gas temperatures, which are quite high. So the spray water system needs to be re-looked at. Then at the back, I showed you in the boiler, at the back there is a system that removes particulates. Because of the high furnace exit gas temperatures that we are seeing, and also the fouling, the flue gas that ends up in the system, the bags that we use to filter the flue gas, we have to replace them on a regular basis. We had anticipated to replace them, not as frequent as we currently doing at the moment. So we've got challenges around the fabric filter plant. Then there's a milling plant. Also we've got challenges around the milling plant. The coal specification is actually what the plant was designed for, so there's really not much concerns that we have around the coal. However, when the plant was designed, there were certain assumptions that were made around the northern hemisphere type of coal is not the same as the southern hemisphere type of coal. So there were certain assumptions that were made when we were designing the plant, that when we started doing performance testing and validation, we then started seeing some challenges, which also includes the milling plant. Then there's a gas air heater that I spoke about. It's not performing as it should. The dust handling plant right at the back, once you remove the ash out of your flue gas, you need to pump or transfer the ash into the silos and then condition it, mix it with water and pump it into the ash dump. So that system for handling the ash is not working as it should, but we've got plans, we know exactly what are the problems. Then there's the distributed control system. Some of you may recall that for unit MYPD, for unit 1, 2, 3, we replaced that system with another system because we were not happy with the performance of that system. We did not replace unit 6, 5, and 4. At that time, there was a lot of pressure to support the grid and make sure that we stop load shedding. So we still have to go back to those units, unit 6, 5, and 4, and relook at the control system that we have there. Then there's high vibrations on the generator aux cooling loop. We've since sorted out that issue. Then the last one, it's the people's issue, spares management, maintenance, etc. Because we had built the plant on a certain baseline that we're going to do maintenance in a certain format, a certain cycle, we're finding ourselves having to maintain the plant more frequently. So we need to relook at the maintenance and the spares availability to support our maintenance plans. The next slide now is to talk to the 9-point plan. Bradley showed you the 9-point plan. At the top is fixing the new plant. So what are we doing to fix a new plant? Internally, we've set up a team of expert ESCOM internal resources. We've pulled them out of what they're currently doing, just to focus on fixing the new plant and identifying all the issues that I spoke about. We know exactly where the challenge is. We've got plans. We're working very hard around the clock to do the calculations and then come up with solutions jointly with our contractors. We have regular meetings with the contractors as opposed to the initial approach of saying, Mr. or Miss Contractor, go and fix the problem. We're now working as a team together with our contractors to come up with their solutions. We monitor progress on a weekly basis. We sit with the contractor, we sit internally and monitor progress. But this does not mean we're no longer holding the contractors accountable. We're still supporting the project. There are levers that we are utilizing as per the contracts that we have. The first one is what we call defects notification period. Up to 18 months after commercial operation, we can always raise defects and hold the contractor accountable to fix the defects. So we're supporting the teams in doing that. The difference is the root cause analysis in terms of finding out what is the problem, etc. The onus is on the contractor to do that. Once we've gone past the 18 months, we go into what we call latent defect. The onus to prove that the defect is because of the contractor's errors or whatever, then becomes Eskom's responsibility. And we're currently doing that for some of the units that are in commercial operation. Then there is low performance damages, in particular for the reheater spray that I said we're spraying quite a lot to reduce the temperatures. We've now applied the performance damages. We are withdrawing money, or withholding money, and asking the contractor to pay Eskom back. Then the last one is payments, where the systems are not performing as they should in terms of the contract. We are withholding a percentage of the payments. We're already doing that for the gas air heater that I spoke about in the beginning, and for the bags that you use for filtering your flue gas before it goes into the atmosphere. So we are using these levers. We are hoping that bulk of the money we can recover from these levers that are in the contract. We can use this money to fix the defects that we currently dealing with. In the event that we cannot force the contractor to fix these defects, we need to have a contingency. So Eskom has to come in and we incur the cost to actually fix the plant. It's in the best interest of Eskom and the country that we get these plants to operate properly in the next coming years. Then the last slide, Chairperson, just to show progress. There are some issues that we started working with way back in 2010, 2012. We've closed some of those, so we're making progress. And then there's still some that we're currently dealing with. Some of them I spoke to about in the previous slides. Chairperson, I'm going to stop here.
Right, in terms of maintenance, we had some queries, and there are two things I'd like to address in that. Is firstly our maintenance program and what maintenance we are doing. So if we look back from the 2017 financial year, that's from 1st of April 2016, we had the 231, I'll show you this here. We had 231 outages in the base plan. Since then, we have completed 124 of them, and 14 more are in execution. 47 have been deferred, it means out of this period, so they will only be done after March this year, and 46 were cancelled. Now, for various reasons. One is we modified our maintenance philosophy, so we no longer base it purely on a time-based requirement, but we also look at the risk and have risk analyses, etc., as well as the condition-based requirements to whether or not these maintenance activities are required. So 46 of them have been deferred, and 46 cancelled. In addition, some of those were also on the Kritla, Hendrina and Komati units that are no longer operating, so obviously they are no longer required. But now, in addition to this 231, we have added 121 outages during this period. So we're actually doing more than what we actually had in the plan. And then just to give you a look forward, these are the outages in the current plan for the next 3 years. Obviously, it will be optimized as we get closer to the time, but that's what's in the current plan. Now, the next thing I'd like to look at is we've heard a lot about the effectiveness of the maintenance. So what I'd like to show here is that over the months, what we've got is the impact of unplanned outages in those 2 months after the units come back from outages. So what we can see is that your post-outage UCLF, that's what we call it, and what it is, so it contributes 0.6% to UCLF. So points of the 16.5% UCLF overall for this financial year so far, 0.6% of that was in the 60 days after outages. Thank you. Conclusion. So from a generation point of view, I'd like to sum up a few key points. So we need to emphasize that the root cause of the current performance is the over 10 years of running in the red zone, of running the units very, very hard, primarily due to the late decision to build, late being allowed to build. However, we acknowledge there are internal things we can look at, some of them related to the hard running, some of them not, and that's where the 9-point plan comes in. That focuses not only on the plant issues, but also people and processes. The production plan has been updated from what was used in the application, using the latest data, assumptions, etc., taking all of these into account. The units from Peripheral, Henry and Command have been removed, those that are already shut down, and those that we plan on shutting down in the period are removed from when they will be shut down. Even though there's no capex on these units, we will require more capex due to these changes. And OPEX that's already there will be reallocated where it's most needed. And then, as Dr. Titus explained, the new build design issues are known and we are looking at them. Thank you.
Chairperson, I'll go into what does this all mean in terms of adjusting for and costing the impact on the production plan, the sales, etc. And I think just to reiterate the approach when Eskom made this application of 15% times 3, we looked at the point where by the end of the 3 years we could be in a position to meet the debt service commitments. You will see that in the application that we made, there is a shortfall in our cash requirements for the first 2 years that adds up to 50 billion. And in adjusting for these changes, for now, Chair, we've made the assumption that we still want to get to year 3 where we can meet our commitments. There will be a shortfall for the first 2 years, and that's the approach we've taken. So once you've got much more expensive production coming online, and on top of that you're dividing it by a lower volume, one would expect that the outcome in terms of the equation, that the percentage will go up. And that's what is shown in the impact that we do have. So Chairperson, what I want to focus there on is more the changes column. And effectively you can see, based on the regulatory asset base, what has changed, and as we discussed, the units taken out. But within this adjustments, and you'll see in my next slide, there is some additional capex that's required for the performance in terms of the 9-point plan. That also comes into the regulatory asset base. You will see that from a primary energy perspective, and we've got a more detailed slide on that. Those costs then increase, for example, 1.7 billion in the first year, and then it drops off by the end of the year. The IPPs, in terms of the latest information we have, and in particular the first year around the OCGTs, where the performance of the overall production plan is, there's pressure to run the open cycle gas turbines harder. That is why you have that adjustment on the IPPs. We're importing a little more from across the border, and then you see the implications in terms of when you deal with the depreciation and the rand. Maybe just to explain again is when there's a negative amount, percentage, it's a negative return, and then it goes to a positive 2.1. Here, overall, what we're showing here is, yes, there's more production costs that come in line, and then you're dividing it by a lower volume to get to the same revenue requirement based on the application we made, and to get to the point by year 3 where you can meet your debt service commitments. The percentage do go up in the first year, and then it gets to about 15.5 in the third year. Now, we've done the calculation. If you had to maintain the 15% times 3, what happens is that the 50 billion, that shortfall that we talked about, that amount will grow to 71 billion over the 3 years. But even with this adjusted price spot, it gives us additional 4 billion shortfall over the window. Chairperson, and in the detail in terms of the production plan and what has changed in terms of the technical performance, the new build, etc. That's the gigawatt changes column. You would expect that the coal production has decreased, as you see there, and then you see the OCGTs increasing, and what we've done in terms of the international purchases. So, Chairperson, that is the overall net adjustment in terms of the production plan. I did allude to the fact that there is your capex changes to execute and implement the 9-point plan of what is required, and in terms of then actual costing of that production plan, that's the detailed update on the primary energy costing, where, for example, you see the reduction in coal burn in the first year, but to highlight that where the system is and what options are available at this point in time, you see then the big increase in OCGTs to 6 billion, and then ramping down to 900 million at the end of the cycle. And there's the different components, giving you a net increase in primary energy costs of 3 billion in the first year, 1.8 in the second year, and then 400 million in the third year. Chairperson, these are the adjustments that we've done based on our assumptions and the changes around sales, around the production and the commissioning and the performance of not only the existing fleet, but as well as the new build. Chairperson, that's our presentation for today, and I'll just sit down to take the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eskom, for the presentation. I'm going to ask the members of the panel to ask questions and questions only in relation to the presentation, just for clarity purposes, and indicate where specifically you want additional information, and that will be the approach in asking the questions. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Eskom. Chair, if I can start with the RCA presentation. So in your slide number 2, where you talk about the risk management process, so you indicated that the increase in costs will mainly be due to the changing environment and assumptions, or Nersa decisions that have been made in terms of the MYPD plan. Now, what you are not saying is that there could be changes in costs or there could be an increase in costs that are due to suboptimal decisions that ESCOM would have taken, and this is not reflected. So what I want to find out is, are you discounting the issue around increasing costs as a result of suboptimal decisions that ESCOM would have taken in the past? Because I think that is where the gist of the matter is. And then with respect to liquidating the RCA, so your proposal is to do it within this current MYPD period. And I'm not sure whether you have considered the fact that so you have these decisions that we have made with respect to the RCA years 2 and 4. Now you're going to have RCA year 5, and then you're going to have the MYPD 4. And Chair, probably I wouldn't want to talk about the 1-year MYPD, but I think it's something that you need to take into account, and the impact thereof on consumers. So I'm not sure your proposal, whether you have considered all those factors, that you have these multiple decisions that need to be taken and implemented simultaneously. Have you considered the impact on consumers of your proposal? And then on your MYPD presentation, so if I can go to your slide number 13, where you show the ESCOM's availability, the benchmark there. Now you say that the general trend is that as the fleet ages, you would expect that there will be lower EAF, but the assumption is only with few or no units being commissioned in this period. But we know that in our case, there were new units that were commissioned. So if you take those into account, surely you are performing way below the benchmark, because the assumption is you would have a high UCLF with aging fleet, but assuming there are no units that are being brought into commercial operation. In our case, the reality is there were new units that were being brought into commercial operation. However, we still experience high UCLF. So probably you need to then explain as to how do you reconcile that. And slide number 17. So your decreased maintenance spend. You're saying it was due to financial constraints from financial year 2018. But ESCOM's financial challenges did not start in financial year 2018. So my question really is, what is it that you did differently between 2018, which actually resulted in a higher availability factor before 2018, because your financial problems did not start last year. So what is it that you were doing differently before 2018? Chair. Yeah, so slide 20, there are those assumptions that you are making, and one of the assumptions is around the commissioning dates for the new build program. And in the past, we know that these dates have been missed. Now, I'm not too sure as to how confident ESCOM is with respect to the revised dates for commercial operation of the new unit, and what the implication is if these dates are actually missed in terms of this particular application. Are we being realistic here? What I also didn't understand in slide number 22 is that, so you have revised your assumptions due to lower expected demand, but at the same time you are anticipating higher OCGT usage, yet there is going to be lower demand. And at the same time, you are anticipating new units to be brought into operation. So why are we still seeing high OCGT usage, given those anticipated occurrences? If we are going to have the new units coming into commercial operation, if we are going to have lower than expected demand, why are we continuing to see high OCGT usage in that period? And then slide 28. Just out of interest, I just wanted to check what happened to Unit 6 between September 2018 and November 2018, because it is completely not available. So I just wanted to understand what happened during that particular period, and are we past that particular issue? Whatever happened, are we expecting a complete shutdown of that particular unit in the future, or are the issues resolved? And then slide 21, with respect to distributed control system, it seems as if we are saying that corrective maintenance programs are ineffective, but it's not clear to me what then are you putting as an alternative, or what is it that you are doing to make sure that you fix the challenge. Okay, Chair, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spanier. Mr. Please. Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to the ESCOM presenters. I will try not to repeat whatever questions that have been asked by my colleague. Just would like to get in your presentation on the RCA, you mentioned that you still believe that ESCOM is compliant with methodology and never had a changes in the numbers. I was not looking necessarily from the compliance with the methodology point of view, but the perusal of each item, taking due regard of also the fraud and corruption context and possible inefficiencies with respect to fixed costs at the time, as well as the acquisition of coal. So I would like you maybe to kind of clarify that. The liquidation issue has been dealt with my colleague, and then on because I'm saying this was on the one slide you're talking about the RCA of 2019, where you're going to put in the inefficiencies, but I think that there were also inefficiencies during the period that I'm reviewing. When it comes to MYPD 4, you speak here of the sales, international sales reduction, but in your revised figures, I see that you have got also an increase in terms of the imports. I would like to understand if would you still increase the sales and better manage the issue of non-payment, because that's the issue that you have been highlighted. I think I also would request that maybe you reconcile slide 7 to slide 20 in terms of those units that are out, and I just want to confirm that those units will not be are not in the REB, those that are on reserve storage. And then with regard to your benchmark, because I'm looking there, slide 13 going down. With regard to your benchmark, if you can just provide more context on the applicability of this benchmark to ESCOM in terms of plant sizes, the coal quality, because it's one thing to have a benchmark, it's how then relevant it is to what or applicable it is to the ESCOM plants as such. And then you continue to talk of your slide 16, and then on the slide 16, I just would want to know if your new build were working as planned or originally envisaged, how would these graphs look like? Because that you must move from to say if really things went according to plan, how would those graphs look like, and then not make the consumer pay for the inefficiencies in managing the new build program. You also highlighted that you switched from time-based maintenance philosophy to condition-based philosophy, where one would envisage that with a condition-based philosophy you would get better with time. But it doesn't seem like in the case of ESCOM, because if my understanding is that if you've got a condition-based, you then become better because there are certain indicators that show to you that this plant is now getting worse and it's time for you to take it out of commission. So in terms of the change of this philosophy, why again should and the resultant losses that come with it, why should the customer pay and not ESCOM? And then the other thing is that in terms of commissioning the new build now, look at slide 28. In terms of the new build, it is a known fact that when you move from commission to ready for operation, you will pick up some teething problems as well as startup problems. And then why are we having these complex problems that seem to be design faults and not so much of, I would say, teething problems that one expects when you are starting up a plant or at the commissioning stage? So why not then reduce the capex that goes with an equivalent plan? Why not change the equivalent plan in terms of capex and performance? Because it means that actually the design is that the plant is rated at one level, whereas the plant itself, in terms of the design, is not at that level. By the plant, I don't just mean the boiler, I mean everything, even if you're talking of the precipitators that accompany the boiler, if you look at the flue gas. So it's important that we then be able to re-rate that plant and then re-rate it in terms of what the equivalent capex would have been for that size of plant, because it's definitely not giving the output that is expected of it. And then you also mentioned the claims against contractors. Where have you discounted that in what you then request in terms of the 15% increase? And then you talk of also the latent defects, which are ESCOM's responsibilities. I hope that there are also ESCOM's responsibilities in terms of carrying the can with regard to them. So please, just want to get a clarity whether you have discounted them from the consumers. And then lastly, on your primary energy increase on your slide 39, going forward, I just would like to know if you kept the coal burn rate at the optimal point for each plant that is talking to that, because it's a bit difficult where you've got an increase, and at the same time you are increasing the use of OCGTs, but there's an increase also on the coal side. So just want to get some clarification with regard to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kize.
They say this is a public hearing.
Can you attend to that? Can you attend to that? Everyone who's going to speak here.
Yeah, ma'am.
Can you attend to? There's a gentleman there who can attend to you there.
No, but Chief, we are here. We need that. You need to have the document. Seems that Nersa is talking on behalf of us. No, listen, Chief. We are here to listen.
Mr. Foley.
Can the public ask ESCOM some questions? So that Nersa can...
Puti, just hold on. You wanted to address me, Puti. Can you just hold on? When you came here, we've already set out the rules, how the questions are going to be asked. I think it is important, first of all, to at least also accord us the respect, just like you want to be respected. Yes, and then if you want to ask questions, we've already indicated how the questions will be asked by the members of the public, including the audience here. So you were not here at that stage, you were late, so that gentleman who stood up was going to assist you. So if you have questions to ask the ESCOM, you're not going to ask them directly because these are Nersa's hearings, but you will write your question down and the question will be brought here, that question will then be asked. Mr. Funi?
But they could have not told us that it's a public hearing. It's not a public hearing. It's a Nersa hearing. It's not a public hearing. It's a Nersa hearing. Yeah.
So who's conducting? Excuse me. I don't think that you want to be heard. So if you want to be heard, you would want Nersa to be here so that Nersa can take your views into consideration. So that is why it is Nersa who organized this gathering, so that Nersa can hear you. Let's differentiate between that and yourselves. So if you say it's a public hearing, it means that you will be here and you will be making your voice heard, and there is a process in terms of that, so that we maintain order in this gathering. If we don't do that, we won't have an opportunity to hear your views. So we do want to hear your views. Hence, we then advertise this gathering so that we can hear your views. If we don't organize the gathering, we're not able to hear your views. So if you can cooperate and make sure that you talk to the gentleman and we can see how we can listen to you so that you come here and say what you want to say. That's how it's supposed to work. So the point is that you were not here earlier on so that you can hear how we're going to conduct it. And I hope that it's going to be done in that fashion so that at least we've got a gathering that is in order. I would request your cooperation there. Mr. Funi?
Thanks, Chair. Slide number 16, I think you made quite a number of statements lamenting the long-term running of the plant in what you call the red zone. So just for slide number 16, notwithstanding the benchmark, are you able to give us the information as to what was the design specification? So what were these plants designed to run at? What utilization factor? Slide number 22, you know, in reducing your RAB, etc., you've increased the OCGT usage due to taking some plant out of the RAB. Can we please get the business case for that? There must have been a business case for increasing OCGT usage versus the spending the extra capex to keep some of their plant running longer. Chair, I'm trying to do the 5 minutes. So slide number 31. So on slide number 31, okay, so for all of these issues with Medupi, Kusile, etc., and then you've got a slide where you said a number completed, etc. Can you give us what the cost of all this was? And then who paid and who pays, who's going to pay? Related to also, Mr. Mkize mentioned this around the slide 32, you talk about damages for low performance. The question is how much have you recovered? But not so much also just that quantum, but what did it actually cost us? Because you might have had to run OCGTs because of the low performance, and you've recovered some money, but I'm guessing it wasn't close to what the actual cost was to the system. And then slide number 39 and 40, I think, Mr. Casson, this was really why I had an issue about using, you mentioned, I think it was in Cape Town, that you're using the WACC or the return as a balancing number to keep to the 15% per year. I'm just wondering if that philosophy has changed, because with the change in production, reduction, etc., I might have expected the percentage increase to go down, or the cost actually to go down, that line that says the total allowable revenue. But you seem to have changed your philosophy around wanting to maintain the 15% as to versus maintaining the allowable revenue number. What's changed then? And because that means whatever you change, it doesn't matter. You're going to just keep that allowable revenue line the same because you're using something to kind of modify the number. And then my last question I had is this system availability, or the what's the EAF number that I think if you modified it now to 71.5, 72.5 and 73.5. I mean, the availability of your coal plant has been much lower. Can you just clarify for us that number when you calculate it? Is it a weighted average? In other words, is it weighted according to the size of the plant that or the station, or is it just a simple average? You take all your stations, the availability, and you divide it by the number of stations. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you very much, Mr. Odisa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the ESCOM team. Just as it relates to the RCA, just a few questions. I know when you that last slide, second last slide, slide number. The slide where you're assuming that, or slide number 7, where you're assuming that where you're requesting that we liquidate it over years 2 to 4. Can I just understand that? Are you actually suggesting that there should not be any adjustment to the 2.6 billion that you've applied for? That in fact we should be allowing the full amount, notwithstanding all the questions that we asked you. And then just on slide number 5, you call those operating costs that are going higher, you call them efficient operating costs. I'm wondering whether it's just a misunderstanding. And just one last thing on just slide number 2. I just think we need to just have some sort of ownership, because you indicating the Nersa decisions made for MYPD 3 revenue decisions did not make it material. In reality, Nersa decisions are based on your forecast. So, and I think we need to just have some ownership, of those elements. But I think what is critical is perhaps go to the MYPD 4, your application, and we'll probably just ask questions on the slides as they come. On slide 3, you said you made no adjustment to operational expenditure. You'll see in the numbers you have not made any adjustments. Can you just explain why your operating expenses do not have to be adjusted in an environment where your production plan and everything else seems to indicate that you are going to be, there's going to be less revenue, less volume coming from ESCOM. That's just on slide number 3. And slide number 5, please explain, and perhaps this you can give to us in writing, where your export sales are declining. You're saying you discontinued supply to non-paying international customers, and some new contracts not materializing. Can you perhaps give us that information in writing? I think if there's confidentiality, you don't have to give it to us now. And just on slide 7, my understanding of the slide, in fact, if you look at bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, that in fact we're looking at as many as 24 units that are not going to be in operation, and that you're going to be taking out of the installed base. But if I look at slide 85, I don't see all those units being included in there. Can you just explain what the differences are? I think I count only 19. But also, later on, I know you indicate that you still need to spend some capex on this. Can you just explain where that capex comes from and what the nature of that capex is? And if you go to slide 8, sorry, slide 8. No, slide 17. If you go to slide 17, where you're talking about the outage slips and boiler tube leaks and that, the question that I have here is that capex that you said you're going to be spending, how much of it is on old plant and new plant? Can you just break it down for us? Particularly the 26 billion. And please explain the outage slips. And then the production plan, slide 20. And maybe this is where I just need to just get a more understanding. And again, you can bring us some of the information in writing. Those new builds, those plants that have been built, can you please explain how the impact of the slippage in the plants coming into commercial operation, what the impact of this is? That's the first thing. But I just want us to talk a little bit more about why you seem to be wanting to use more OCGTs. And the question that I need to ask is, why have you considered other cheaper alternatives? You realize that during the MYPD 3, one of the programs we used to have were short-term special short-term purchase program and medium-term purchase program. Can you just indicate why are you not using those? Effectively, why are you not buying cheaper power from other generators, some of the core generators that had supplied you with that power, STTPs? Why have you not? Why are you not looking at those as cheap alternatives to the use of OCGTs? I know you're planning a 10% load factor on the OCGTs. So please explain why this is still cheaper than using the STPPs and MTPPs, the short-term power purchase program and long-term power purchase program. And just on your maintenance, again on your capex. Our understanding was some of the plants you were going to run to failure. And if that is the case, how is it that you're still wanting to spend more capex on some of those plants? And if we go to slide number 21, or the problems that you have in using your plant. There's a few issues that arises out of this. I know on slide 31 you're explaining the problems with the boilers and fabric filter plants and milling plants and this sort of thing. And you indicated that you're looking at solutions. Can you just share with us some of the details of the solutions? You do have a 9-point recovery plan on page 32, on slide 32. Can you indicate the costing of that and how it's translated in your new application? Because indications are you now are no longer looking at a 15% tariff increase. You're looking at a 17% in the first year. And then please give us details of the damages that you've charged the contractors that have not supplied, that have designed your client incorrectly. Have you called on the bonds? To the extent that some of the suppliers let you down, or original equipment manufacturer let you down, have you called on your bonds? Because to just withhold payments may not be sufficient. But what is also critical though is to indicate the real adjustments you feel we need to be making to your CapEx program, to your capital expenditure that you're asking the consumers to pay, that would be related to your own inefficient build of the plants. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Modise. I just have a few questions of clarity. I want to start on the RCA, and I want to say that Eskom has still not provided us with sufficient information. And if Eskom has not provided us with the information, even when we indicated what our approach is going to be, we take it that that's all the information that you have given us, and we take a decision based on the information that is at our disposal, if that information is not coming forward. I will, for instance, start off with the impact analysis. It was requested at the start of the hearings in Cape Town. We said you state what you want, but we said you must also consider what impact that would have. Firstly, in the economy, also the sectoral impact this would have in various sectors. Impact on employment, as we know that there are sectors that are quite sensitive to high prices, and therefore they will want to shed some jobs. We said we want you to consider those, as well as the impact on the affordability by consumers and the members of the public that are consuming electricity. And the fourth thing, the impact on the sales volumes. We are still stating it out in all those factors. So we expected Eskom to then revise or bring us that additional information in terms of those main categories, so that we can understand, even when you say you want the money to be recovered in 2023, but what did you take into account, where this is going to translate in an increase in electricity prices. The second issue that is still not coming out, after we've emphasized so many times, is where you talk about that fixed cost recovery argument that you are making. We had indicated that in terms of these sales, the sales volumes that were not achieved, that obviously is attributable to the price elasticity of demand, the responsiveness, the sensitivity to price increase. And that is still not coming out. You have not adjusted according to that. You also have not taken into account the substitutability aspect. You have stated in Rustenburg that yes, the output was lower than what you were supposed to have produced, and it is caused also by the substitutability, people switching to other sources of energy. What adjustment have you made with regards to that? And we stated clearly that it is the sales loss analysis. Where is that sales loss? We want to understand it, and it's still not coming out. And all that you are putting is all of these things, but you're not indicating that sales loss analysis impacted by price elasticity of demand, by substitutability, and by your own admission. You also said it is because of the cogeneration. That's what you said in Rustenburg. And we use that evidence that you use, and you say, then use it, show us how do you take accountability for that. And also what is not coming out on this adjustment that we want to see for sales volumes that were lower is the lower energy availability factor. You have not adjusted sufficiently on that, and the energy utilization. Especially the energy utilization, we want to also see it in terms of the uneconomic plants, because those uneconomic plants were included in the regulatory asset base for the RCA for 2017-18, and they simply did not perform or contribute positively to the service. So how do you adjust that to take accountability of the lower EAF as well as the or energy utilization factor? Then that obviously you must in your slides show what was the assumed output in megawatts versus the actual output. By so doing, you will be able to indicate then your own production capacity constraints. Because then even if you say the demand was low, were you in a position or did you have the ability to meet the demand? That's one thing. Were you in a position to produce the output that you said now it's Nersa's decision? It approved those volumes that you stated. That's the part that we will look at, and if it's not coming out, we just want to state clearly that is obviously the approach in terms of the analysis that Nersa will be undertaking. The other issue that you did not attend to, which we've asked, in the regulatory asset base, we said you must adjust based, yes, on the value of the assets, those that you are taking out, which you did today. You showed us those that you are taking out, but what is not coming out clearly is how you estimated the value of those units, so that we can also understand the value of those units and how then they impacted on the value of the RAB. The second thing is, we said when you did your valuation of the RAB, you did not demonstrate two important standards. One, the performance. Two, the efficiency standard. So that we can understand this value that you are apportioning to your plants. And then we can do our own analysis. The third point is on maintenance. We see that you are increasing the cost for maintenance, but also in the RCA you have not demonstrated the cost savings around maintenance. Reason being that the reason why we want you to demonstrate that is two things. One is the fact that you did not carry out maintenance as you were supposed to, and you deferred maintenance. And not only that you deferred maintenance and you conducted poor maintenance, the quality of that maintenance was very poor, because sometimes the plant is taken out for maintenance for a long time. When it comes back, it suffers major failures. So that must be adjusted for. And last, it was in the previous RCAs last year, that part was emphasized, not only in terms of quality, but also the scoping of that maintenance. And there was an adjustment specifically by ESCOM. This time around, you are just not doing it at all. So that is the part that is going to be assessed in line with the lower EAF when we look at the RCA. And you should have learned from the decision that we have taken even previously in terms of the approach on that. And then the second thing why we think that the maintenance, the savings on maintenance are important is because we want to see how are you going to conduct your maintenance now in the MYPD 4 period, and whether the money that you are asking for indeed will be is the prudent amount that could be allowed or not. And also for Nersa to be able to identify areas of improvement, as we should, areas of improvement with each application that is brought before us. So if we're not getting the sense on the operational expenses, how we're utilizing those, that would not give us a clear indication of the areas that we need to look at. Now coming to the production plan, very quickly, what we have not seen the factor that you did not take into consideration is the challenges with ESCOM maintaining or keeping the required coal stockpile. That's number one. How did you factor that in? Because it is going to impact your production capacity. How is that taken into consideration? And also, you indicated that you're going to, and this goes to the question of the efficiency standard that you need to take into account. The fact that you say there will be a higher OCGT usage, more than what we had previously, would that not indicate inefficiencies on the part of ESCOM, because that will increase the cost of production? It will be high. So if we were to look into this application and we grant or we allow cost to an efficient operator, how would you want us to take this factor into account if you are going to utilize more OCGTs? And I think I'm adding that aspect because I think it didn't come out clearly from the colleagues who have asked about this. And I think also the rationale for increasing the OCGTs when you've got new plants that are supposed to come into or to units that are supposed to come into operation. And that will be something that we consider in terms of the efficiency standard. The other thing that did not come out is the period for fixing the problems in the new build. So we want to understand that period so that we can see what adjustments need to be made in the production plan as well as the sales volumes that are supposed to be produced by ESCOM. The other part that did not come out, ESCOM did not do any estimate of costs that ESCOM is incurring as a result of the inefficient operations of the new plants. All of the things that you have stated there, what you had to to do to manage all of these defects and the problems and the trips, you did not estimate the cost that you are incurring, which you were not supposed to incur as you have the new plants. And lastly, ESCOM, how did ESCOM optimize and adjust its production plan to align with the lower EAF or the utilization factor that is sitting at about 60% on the new plants? How did you adjust for that? And that would be the last question. If you can answer those questions, please.
Chairperson, thanks. I think firstly on the detail around the written information around the exports, Mr. Modise, yes, we'll submit that. Maybe one of the first questions around the RCA and the impact. Chair, firstly, in terms of the volumes, what we've showed at the hearings in terms of our performance on sales, here we demonstrated, based on our evidence as Eskom, our view is that we see the price increases and what we see on total sales being relatively inelastic. Because if you take the actual year-on-year sales volumes of Eskom's over the MYPD 3 period, it's been decreasing at about 1% per annum. But we did highlight, and the chair is correct, there are definitely sectors within that that are much more sensitive, like the gold and the platinum sector. So, Chair, we will also look to address this key point again in Midrand over the 2 days. But what I just want to say that based on what we've seen on a total basis, we're saying our conclusion that it's relatively inelastic. But we did acknowledge certain sectors. Chairperson, in terms of...
No, Mr. Kasim, on that one, it was already indicated. Yes, in terms of price sensitivity, but what we did not touch on, which was admitted by Eskom, is the substitutability element. So it is very different from the responsiveness. So the substitutability, even mentioned cogeneration, so we said those are in addition. So if you can just add.
We'll focus on substitutability in Midrand. Chairperson, maybe just getting quickly to the RCA items in terms of, and I didn't highlight it, although it was on the slide. Maybe let's start on the fraud and corruption. Yes, we are doing a number of investigations, and as and when we recover that money linked to fraud and corruption, it will be included in subsequent RCAs, etc. For example, at our session, I think it was in Nelspruit, McKinsey as an example, we did recover the 902 million rand. Now, in terms of the methodology, that money was recovered in this financial year, and when we do the RCA for 18-19, what you will see in that is this recovery of the 900 million being included in this year's RCA, which we will submit end of next year. Chairperson, the point I'm highlighting there is, as we're busy with the investigations and recoveries, and I guess it's also linked to the point on claims, we only can be putting the amounts as and when it's concluded. Yes, there's investigation, but because we haven't recovered it, hasn't happened, it's not being included. So that's the point there. The point, Chair, on coal, I'll let us now to talk about that. Maybe just to get back on the liquidation, it's our proposal now that we do acknowledge, yes, this will have an impact. All we're saying is that MYPD 3 started from 2013 Rand to 2018. And effectively, this RCA applications over the period, from a cash flow perspective, Eskom didn't have that difference in cash, in actual mode. So we borrowed basically for that over the period. Now we need to meet and pay back those borrowings that's linked to the RCA amounts. Now, Chairperson, the point I'm highlighting, if we further push out the recovery of RCAs, when does Eskom actually recover money to meet that shortfall that was incurred through the RCA process? We believe that our proposal of the 2.8 in the second year and recovered over the remaining 3 years, which aligns to the 4-year horizon that Nersa has made on the 32 billion, we think that was a reasonable assumption to make in terms of the liquidation. And again, Chairperson, it's our proposal, you will make your decision regarding the liquidation. Maybe just the The other point, Mr. Foley said, yes, you're correct. We did say that we use the return on assets as a balancing number to get to a revenue requirement. And as I said, in this adjustment to MYPD 4, our approach was get to year 3 where Eskom can meet its cash requirements, and that is why the adjustment we have taken. So within that, Chairperson, is the cost that change, and that is the approach we have taken in the MYPD 4 in terms of that. I highlighted that if you had to keep whatever the original return percentage were, with the higher cost based on the production plan and the capex, the shortfall from a cash perspective for Eskom will be bigger than the initial application. Chairperson, maybe let me just touch on the issue around this capex, and I think it's maybe not clear in what we presented. And Mr. Modise and some of the members touched on it. We are not asking this additional capex in the last slide. None of it relates to the 24 units that are coming out. As part of fixing the remaining existing assets, Mr. Modi said, that's the capex, but I think it's linked to the detail. Which are the stations, how much of that? And similarly on the RAB, in terms of the reductions, what is the value of each of that, and we'll provide that in budget. But I just want to say, it's got nothing to do with the 24 units. We're not spending capex on that. Maybe I'll ask some of my colleagues to deal with others, and I'll come back on some of the other issues.
If we can be very concise and straight to the point on each issue.
Of course. Okay, we were asked about the overall trend of the availability benchmark and why it was still showing in line with an aging fleet, even though you had 2 new units coming in. Firstly, it's just 2 units out of quite a few more, 2 stations rather. But also, I think everyone's heard of the bathtub curve, where in the beginning of the life of a station, you expect higher unavailability and lower availability. Yes, there's specific issues, but you do expect it anyway, so that is still consistent. The question, Mr. Swone's question about the decreased maintenance spend in the last couple of years, why? And why was there a constraint where there hadn't been previously? Well, the constraint was always there, we just managed to borrow against it. But our ability to borrow more to account for that had run out, so that was an accelerated constraint. In terms of the confidence level and impact of the commissioning dates of the new build stations, I'll leave Dr. Titus to talk about the confidence level, but the impact, obviously, if the units come back earlier than the assumption, less generation will be required from the other stations. If it comes later, more generation will be required from the other stations. In terms of the updated assumptions, there's lower demand, etc. Why higher OCGT usage? The higher OCGT usage is because of the lower EAF of our current fleet. In terms of the applicability of the benchmark, VGB is probably the best benchmark we can get. In terms of the sizes, not all the sizes are the same. Some are. It's over all sizes of coal stations. However, it's the best benchmark we can get. And in terms of how applicable it is, typically I would expect their stations to perform better than ours because they typically have, as you've seen from the other benchmarks, a much lower utilization factor, so there's less stress on their units. They would typically have better coal, and many of them are used not as peakers, for example. In terms of if you will plan, okay, I don't know what I'll leave. Yeah, sorry, I'm just checking these questions again. No, that's okay, I'll come back to those ones. The OCGT uses versus extra capex question. In terms of, the question was, why are we spending more money on OCGT usage when we could have brought the units back and spend capex? Over the it's a complex decision that was made. Over the 5 years, the capex required over those units would be around about 26 billion. And we also got to remember that it will also take 12 months at least to bring these units back. So certainly the higher OCGC usage is really only the first or the second year. So those are all taken into account. The question of the performance figures, is it purely an average or is it a weighted average? The performance is actually based on the megawatt hours, the energy. So that incorporates the capacity. So yes, it is a capacity weighted figures. The question about the change in philosophy from time-based intervals, I need to clarify that we still take time-based into account. So it's added to the time-based, we look at risk and condition. Okay, so it's seen as a better methodology. It's an improvement. The design, but the question about the design base of the utilization, the EUF. We'll come back in writing with some numbers that we can find, but it is significantly less than what we have seen over the last 10 odd years. Just to add to what Mr. Kassim said about the capex spend, to confirm there's no capex on any of the units of the 3 stations that will be shutting down at all. The additional OPEX is predominantly for life refurbishment and catching up additional outages, especially the tech plan and outage capex. And we have submitted to Nersa the full plan for the 5-year plan and the life of the plant. So all of that is there. Okay, then there was a question about slips and boiler tubing. Okay, on this particular slide. So in terms of slips, that is where you have a planned duration for each outage, and where the unit does not come back in time, then the energy lost that is not where the unit is not available and it should have been available, that is taken away and counted as unavailability, unplanned unavailability, and that's where that comes from. There are many causes of those, but they certainly include the wear and tear on the plant due to high utilization, where when it's opened up, the condition of the plant may not be what we expected. And then in terms of boiler tube leaks, that is again largely influenced by the high utilization and other factors as well, obviously, but high hard running. And that is where we have leaks, because in the boiler you've got tubes and where the water boils, and where there's a leak in that, it's coming out and the unit needs to be shut down within a certain time frame. As I said, the capex and maintenance we've spoken about. How we conduct maintenance in the future. Well, the 9-point plan includes activities to improve our maintenance. So we have submitted the 9-point plan with some details, so there is detail in that. The challenges with coal stockpiles, have those been taken into account in the production plan? That's not how the production plan works. The production plan makes assumptions about the plant, the demand, and what is required, and then it tells you which stations are required to produce how much electricity. That then informs how much coal you're going to need, and then we have people who look at that, and I think Sal can give you some more detail on that. The high.
Yeah, Chairperson, I think we'll be responding to most of this in writing, but let me just summarize maybe the key ones that were requested. Mr. Sibanda asked the question about Medupi 6, what happened, why it was out for such a long time. As per the contract, we needed to give the contractor guaranteed inspections, so it was a scheduled guaranteed inspections, but they also extended the outage to fix some of the defects. In particular, the spray water flow issue that I mentioned in my presentation, they proposed a solution, they implemented that solution during that outage. and we're now evaluating whether their solution is working or not. So it was longer than normal outage, but basically that was the issue why MYPD was out for such a long time. Mr. Mkiza, just to summarize again, Mr. Mkiza asked the question about the impact if new build was optimal. Ideally, we would love to have all especially the units that are in commercial operation. At Medupi, it's 3 of them, and Kusile is 1. Ideally, we would love to have 800 megawatts available, but unfortunately, we don't have 800 megawatts available at the time. Typically, when all the units are running, instead of 800, they run at about 600 megawatts. If they don't trip, if they trip, then we lose the entire unit. So the impact, if all the units are running, you're looking at a reduction of 200 megawatts times 4, 800 megawatts. If they don't trip, if they trip, then it's another. You lose the entire 800 megawatts times 4. The other question Mr. Mkiza asked is around design faults, what we call design defects. What happened? Because we detect them after commissioning and performance testing. Right at the beginning, we did look at the design, especially for the boiler. We contracted experts to help us because we didn't have the capacity in-house. They looked at the design, and it was okay at that time, depending on the assumptions that were made. But ideally, we would have loved to have more time at the beginning to do pre-feasibility studies, to take the cold samples, do tests. So by the time we contract, especially with Hitachi and others, we would have loved to have actually done extensive test work with real code as opposed to utilizing what we call generic code specification. But that's essentially what happened. If we had more time, around 2006, 2007, we were in a hurry to contract because the decision for ESCOM to build new plants was taken too late. So we were in a hurry to contract as soon as possible. So we didn't have sufficient time to do all the upfront work that typically is required to be done at the beginning. Why not derate the unit? I think it's too early for that. We're following the contract, we raise the defects, we're trying to find solutions. As a last resort, we may well derate the units, but we're not at that point. We still have quite a while to get to that point. But as a last resort, we may well end up there. Regarding the discounting of penalties and how it affects the current MYPD4, I think we'll come back to you or in writing on that. Then Chris asked the question around fleet design parameters. Again, we'll come back to you in writing regarding that. We do know for new build, we set very high standards. We wanted 92% availability, 6% planned maintenance, and 2% unplanned maintenance. For the existing fleet, the target that we started with is 97.3. We then dropped to 80-10-10, and we've subsequently dropped again recently. But we'll come back to you in writing regarding those details. The impact on the delays on the new units, I think we've actually gone through most of the issues. You recall the welding issues that we dealt with at Medupi, CNI issues we dealt with. Now we know the defects, we know exactly what are the challenges that we have. We have a way of dealing with these issues when we put units in commercial operations. So we're very confident with the dates that we currently have. By the end of this year, all the units that we do will have been synchronized, and we'll have resources that we may well remobilize to go to support Kusile Power Station, to fast track Kusile commissioning work. So we're very confident about the dates that we currently have, and we believe that we will have resources to support us regarding that. Then the chairperson asked the question around the period for fixing the new build defects. We're working very hard around that. We're targeting internally the next 6 months to come up with what we call our own solutions. We will then have discussions with the contractors to agree. I'm talking about technically. So in the next 6 months, we're hoping to close all the technical defects from from a technical point of view, will then go into a commercial, contractual disputes or whatever the case might be, and that may well take us another 2 years to get to a point where we start implementing some of the solutions. Now, to implement the solutions, we may have to take the units out, so we may have to take them out for 2 to 3 months outage, fix the defects, and then bring them back. And we're projecting probably around 2021, we'll start taking 1 unit at a time for 3 months or so, fix the defect, bring it back, and continue like that until we've dealt with all 12 units, both at Medupi and Kusile. I think, Chair, I'm going to stop yet. If I miss something, CFO will have to do it.
Morning. Mr. Mkhize, you asked a question on the coal burn rate and the difference between the original application or the production plan in your original application and the revised. I will give you a detailed submission per power station per annum, showing you the variance between the coal burn rate. Coal burn rate being the amount of coal you consume to generate 1 megawatt hour of electricity or 1 unit of electricity. We will give you a written submission per power station per annum. Ms. Masita, you asked a question on the stockpiles. We late last year did a presentation to Nersa on the coal recovery plan and how we're recovering or how we plan to recover. That plan has been taken into account and priced into this revised numbers. Thanks.
Chairperson, the last item I want to just deal with. Mr. Modise asked the question around OCGTs versus other alternatives like ST-PPPs. We have not, for this revision, looked at ST-PPPs because of the duration to get to conclusion of that contract. We got literally, we're getting into February, March. I think it'll be very difficult to get to conclusion of ST-PPP contracts between Eskom and external parties and so go through the necessary approval processes. So Chairperson, we did not look at it. Maybe we can go do some homework and give some feedback in writing, definitely by Gauteng. But obviously then in terms of the merit order and assumption on availability and what's the OCGTs in terms of the merit order is then the balancing number. But we'll come back on ST-PPPs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eskom. I think the questions that are not responded to, but you said you're going to respond to in writing, but also maybe revise your presentations in the next few days. There is also a question that was asked by Mr. Foley with regards to the business case for the use of OCGTs versus the capex spent on decommissioned units. Okay. Yes, that question has not been answered. I think the other part that was not dealt with is the challenges with regards to Ingula. They are not mentioned. You just mentioned them in terms of trips, but in terms of some of the challenges in detail so that we can see the impact there, even the cost and all of that. It's not coming out of your presentation, and we would request you to do so on the 4th to deal with the Ingula issues. I think that's then fine. I don't think that there's any questions that we need to add in writing, because most of the questions were already asked. The only thing that we did not touch on is with regards to maintenance. Can you have a slide dealing with maintenance? Because we want to see the maintenance cost. For instance, we want to understand how you do your maintenance, because if there was maintenance deferment, if it was different, and we know that at some stage there was even backlog on maintenance. Now you're not talking to the cost savings associated with that, with respect to the fact that maintenance was not done as planned and the costs are there. So that is quite important when you go forward. So even when you now say that you are increasing cost of maintenance, we want to understand how have you, if you have done it correctly, would have been in a position to tell what are the realistic and efficient cost associated with maintenance. Now, in this new era of the MYPD4, we're not even able to get to that point. We're not even able as a regulator to point out areas that will require improvements, as we should with each application that is before us.
Here we will come back with the slide on maintenance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eskom, for the presentation. The next presenter is the Minerals Council of South Africa. I have the name of Hendrik Langehoven. Hendrik Langehoven from Minerals Council of South Africa. You're only going to speak when I allow you to speak, sir. Okay. Please adjust the mic, Ms. Nkabela, and may you please raise your right hand, sir? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to share with this panel will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Please state your name and your designation at Minerals Council of South Africa.
I'm Hendrik Langehoven, I'm the Chief Economist at the Minerals Council.
Thank you very much. You may start with your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am, and firstly, thank you for your people and the efficiency and giving us the time to speak here because of the dates around the mining endowment that clashed. You have asked from Eskom, just before I start, about the sectoral analysis. What I'm going to give you is exactly that, what we think will happen in mining. The second issue that came up is the problem or the possibility of substitution of, I presume your question was about electricity generation capacity to replace what Eskom is doing. I would like to say that there is a slide on, for example, the substitution of the melting and refining industry away from South Africa, so that demand may look as if it stays constant, and because Eskom's availability of electricity stays the same, that will tell you that the elasticity stays the same, but there's actually much more hidden behind that. So, to start off with, I just want to give you some idea of the mining sector's contribution to the South African economy. And if I can start on the right-hand axis, the black line is our contribution to exports. Now, it's about 25% of the country's exports, but to give you an idea of how important this is, the country's foreign reserves is $50 billion. We earn $25 billion by exporting our minerals out of the country. Then the rest of it is really on the left-hand scale, the contribution to GDP. It doesn't look that high, about 6-7% depending on how you calculate it. But we buy about double, so the multiplier into the supply industry is about twice that. So you're talking about something like 14% into the whole economy. I'll show you a slide just now. The other important thing to take into account is our symbiotic relationship with both the steel and engineering sector, with the construction sector, and actually also with the automotive manufacturing sector, which is a major portion of the South African economy. And then perhaps one of the most important issues is our contribution to GDP. Our estimate for last year is 455,000 people, and that's the percentage that we are of the overall economy. This is what I was talking about, the symbiosis amongst what I would call the hardcore of the real economy of South Africa. We contribute about 7%, the steel and engineering sector about 4 or 5%. They are very dependent on us, and we on them. The construction sector, we use them to do open cast mining and to do mining and mining development. A large proportion of the turnover of the construction and civil engineering and sector is linked to us. The automotive manufacturing indirectly, because they buy steel from Little, which comes from Kumba, so there is also some relationship there. The total 20% roughly of the economy. And if all of us buy what we are buying, you probably talk about 30 to 40% of the South African economy. So the only reason why I'm showing you this is how important we are as a group into the South African economy, and different from, say, the financial sector, which is a huge portion but doesn't employ so many people. We employ, and if you add agriculture, a massive proportion of the South African people. The next slide emphasizes that just a little bit more, and what I'm trying to do here is to show you that the minerals and metals complex are dependent on what happened internationally, and very unstable and unpredictable and uncontrollable prices for our products, as against electricity that becomes a fixed cost. That the problem that we have with this 15% is it's stepwise increasing that base of our cost, and we will show you a little bit later of what we think that will do. But this is actually the metrics that we look at. 60 to 80% of what we mine is exported, exposed to international commodity prices, exposed to the rand, although it's a good thing that what happened lately is the rand getting stronger, but that actually negates improvements in dollar prices of our commodities. And then the last one is where electricity and administered prices come in quite substantially. Let me show you the next slide just to emphasize that. What you see here is our cost structure. And what we did is we took out labor here at the bottom, so there's a total intermediate cost line here that shows you for each type of mining and overall what we're buying from where. Now what I mean by administered prices, this is how we're exposed to the petroleum industry. This is how we're exposed overall to the electricity, gas and water, all of it administered prices. This is how we're exposed to Transnet and the harbour situation, and the 18% there is what is imported, which we also don't have any control over. And this is why the movements in electricity costs are so important. Of course, all the others are important. There was an article yesterday about us exporting less coal, which is of course important for Eskom. The problem is not so much the international market. The problem is we can't get the coal to Richards Bay. So it is quite crucial. We are very, very dependent on our state-owned enterprise. Now, just to highlight a little bit more, what we've been saying, and some of the panel has already said, overall it doesn't look as if we're so dependent on electricity. But I want to remind you that this is like lifeblood. Without it we can't operate. Gold mining, because it's so deep, it's old, it needs cooling, and to a lesser degree the platinum industry, we need to get down 3-4 kilometers underground. We have to cool down the shafts where the faces of the rock is something like 60 degrees. It costs money to bring it up. It is actually very, very electricity intensive, and we buy the base load of Eskom morning, noon and night. We're not cooking at night asking for more. We buy the electricity all the time. So we are a very crucial, as a matter of fact, 15% of Eskom's client base is the mining sector. If you add the refining and melting part of it, it's 30%. So just to stress how important this is for us. Now we didn't just go and say, right, this is the percentage Eskom is asking, 15 cumulative gives you a certain number times 0.22, that's the number. We actually went into much more detail. But let me just show you the combination of the uncertainty of what we're selling and the costs. What you see here is a graph, and this is actually Minerals Council research that didn't exist before. The red line shows you the movement in commodity prices. We got this idea from the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank looks at all different commodities and compile a dollar-based commodity price index. All we did was we used the World Bank dollar prices converted into that month's exchange rate into rand, and what you see here is the movement of the gold prices, the coal prices, platinum prices, and iron ore prices, which is 80% of what we export. So it gives you a very good idea of whether the commodity prices are improving or not, an overall idea. The blue line is the cost index, an input cost, a proper input cost index based on this table, which we put together. I'm very lucky I have someone that has been working at CIFSA, and we work very closely with Stats SA. So what you see here is being peer reviewed. What I want to show you is how the cost movements have been for a very long time, been higher than commodity prices. Now just superimpose the proportion that Eskom is in there, or Transnet cost or harbour cost, and then you understand why I'm showing you this. Internationally, there's a standard way of looking at how the cost structures of mines come about, and what we talk about is a cost curve. It simply gives you the overall cost of how much has to be put in to produce 1 kilogram of gold or 1 kilogram of platinum. Now what you have here is actually the gold mining sector differentiating between the sizes, so that if you have a wider section here, it's because this mine produces much more, so it gives you the percentages over time. Now the current situation with the cost structure gives you this portion of gold mining that's not profitable. We also work with the concept which we call marginal mines, and it's a simple matrix which says if your revenue, if you don't have more than 6% headway between your cost and your revenue, it is actually not viable to continue. So the mine becomes a gamble to continue. Now, we then superimpose the cost increases that will happen with the 15% increases. And to cut a very long story short, of the 140 tons of gold that we produced last year, there will only be 20 left by the third year, if our argument is right. And that is the core of the message. Combined with this slide, if what I'm saying is true, and it's the best research that we have, and like I'm saying, it's been peer reviewed, I have no reason to doubt this. What we think will happen because of the mines going under, on this axis, on the right-hand axis, this is the number of customers that Eskom will lose over the period, from about 1,000 to just over 600. That will mean that if the 15% is allowed, Eskom will not get the 50 billion that we think is what is bargained for, up from the 24 billion here, which is that line. That is what is proposed, that income must come from the mining and melting sector. Instead, this green line will be the reality. So what our argument is simple. The 15% increase is a dead end. Madam Chair, you asked a question about the impact on customers and income. This is what we think will happen on the best information that we have. And then everybody that I've been talking to the last few days have been asking, but what is the solution? Well, I think the mining sector understands that there has to be some increase. I mean, you spend all this money on the new power stations, which was absolutely needed. So we asked our members, what would you be able to tolerate? What would be the actual thing? And all of them came back with roughly, of course we would say no, and the instinctive reaction would be no. But if what they're saying is, if it's roughly in line with inflation, you will get this blue line of income occurring to Eskom. That will give in the order of, say, 34 billion instead of the 50 that is expected which is 20 billion below, roughly, in rough figures. So the question is, what happens then next year and the year after, or after year 3? Because you will still be short. And the conclusion from that is probably what has been talked about and what I just saw on Twitter, that there has to be some structural adjustment, which I don't want to be going into. We have touched on some of that into the IRP submission that we made. You will hear much more of this, I'm sure, and I know at Monday and Tuesday's presentations from Booza, etc., people that are much better and much knowledgeable than we are. So this is really the core of what we are saying. We know we are in a bind here, and we understand Eskom is in a bind, and we also understand that we can't lose either one of us. So in one or other way, we will all have to take some pain, and we will have to make different decisions, because if we make the same decisions, we're going to just have the same problem a year from now, or 2 or 3 years from now, or maybe in March. This, of course, occurred before. From about 2008...
4 minutes remaining.
Thank you, that's more than enough. From 2008 to about 2017, and I mean, you've seen the numbers and the increases, this is what the impact has been overall of business conditions as well as the electricity cost increases on mining. Now, all I want to show you is if you take 2000 as 100, so if you have a certain number for gold mining, a certain number for coal, a certain number for the others, that was naught. That is what we lost in gold mining. 100,000. For the first time last year, gold mining employed less than 100,000 people. And we really don't want that to continue. And just to give you an idea of the losses, this is something that the Bureau for Economic Research has done. And if we were doing the same and had the same policy decisions and the same cost structure, that dotted line is where South Africa would have been driven by, and you can see there, the commodity exporters. This is where the commodity exporters were, which is where we are. Look at where our peers in sub-Saharan Africa is. This is where we ended, and we are very, very concerned that this will happen again. Just to come back to this elasticity issue, I didn't realize that this slide would be so useful in that. The one is that we must remember that on the left-hand axis is production. Mining production has not recovered after the shocks of the financial meltdown, the commodity price shocks, as well as the electricity cost increases and other cost increases. And it's plotted on the commodity price index. I'm not going to expand on that. But let me expand further on the opportunity cost, which is what we talk about in economics. What you see here is manganese local beneficiation. And you have to start here, and this is the last slide. In 2007, we processed about 30% of the manganese that we mined. It has gone down to less than 2% because the smelters have relocated because of the cost of electricity. The opportunity cost, it's about a 4 to 1. If you export the ton of ore versus the ton of processed ferroalloys, the income for the country is a factor 4. So this is actually the opportunity cost. So although Eskom hasn't seen a change in their demand, there is demand generated somewhere else in another jurisdiction. So the summary is this, and I don't really have to talk about it. We think this was the losses over the previous historical experience that we have. We will probably lose most of the gold mining industry. We will probably lose a big portion of the platinum industry. And because we buy from other sectors, we're going to lose from them as well. The supplying sector, other mining components. And the real worry for us is that we're not going to solve the problem by 15% increases, because both of us will be damaged to such a degree. It's like cutting off a bird's wings. You can't fly. You may have a bird, but you can't fly. And Chair, that is really the message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lange Hoven. If you have a piece of paper and a pen, the members of the perhaps ask specific questions, or perhaps request you to help us with some more information for clarity purposes and for us to do a quality assessment of the application. Mr. Foley?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so additional information, slide 5 and slide 6. On slide 5, you've lumped electricity with gas and water. Are you able to give us just the electricity portion in terms of what the cost structure? And in slide number 6 also, are you able to plot that graph for electricity versus the commodity price and then even the production? If you could send that to us, you don't have to answer that now. I have one other question. Is in November 2017, when you presented to us under a different name, your own name was the same. You said the gold, electricity, gas and water for gold was 22% of the cost structure. Now it's 16%, so it's actually gone down. And that seems to be, the chair will berate you if you try to answer now, so just wait till we finish. So I'm wondering why, because it seems to actually have gone down as a percentage of the cost structure for gold, but you're saying it's getting worse, and this is going to exacerbate things. And then the other question I had, I think it's true, you say Eskom is the lifeblood of the operation. And I think it's also for Eskom, the other side of the coin is they've got to provide you with a constant, secure supply. Otherwise, it's a safety issue. So wouldn't it be that if Eskom doesn't get, let's say they didn't get the money that they say they need to remain sustainable, and they imploded, you would also not have any industry left either? Thanks.
Mr. Mattis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Langehoff. The Eskom said to us, I think it may have been in some of the earlier public hearings, that before they make the forecast and the application, that they consult with some of the high intensive users. The question that I need to ask is, did they consult with you? Did you present the picture that you're presenting now? And have you seen in their application indication that they've taken the warnings that seem to be very stark in your presentation into account? The fact that the whole gold mining industry gets decimated, and the job losses, and the number of families that are affected, close to 3 million families affected, seems to be very scary. But did they take all those into account? Is it your understanding that they did? And if they haven't, I guess the question is going to be, what was the point of them saying they've consulted you? So that's the first question. But the second issue is, and perhaps this you can give to us in writing. If you can give us, this elasticity of electricity demand, and the question that Ms. Masek was asking about substitution, to what extent has the mining industry started generating their own power? So if you're able to give us some figures on your members, how many of them are doing their own self-generation, how many are planning to generate their own power? Because some of these figures we may need to adjust in the sales forecast that Eskom is making. And if they can also give us an indication on the level at which it becomes uneconomic for them to be buying power from Eskom, that will be of assistance. And perhaps on the the structural adjustments, and I know you said it's something that we shouldn't be talking about now. But I think it's something that to the extent that they affect this tariff application. If you're able to share some of those with us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nkisi. Thank you, Chairperson. Thanks for the presentation, sir. I appreciate that you've got the business closure and flight put in respect of the elasticity debate. But we may not have some of the information, so I think that it would be appreciated if you can provide more information anecdotal in terms of the losses in business, because all along we've been talking more around the changing demand by the same customer. But here we are talking about the customer moving out or not even entering a potential customer. So if you can provide that information. And I note also the issue of coal, because when you look at the coal availability, the coal is also, ESCOM becomes a client as well as a supplier. So if you can just shed some light in terms of the coal sector, given that it is a key commodity in electricity generation, what would be both the positive and the negative? You can look at that. And in general, what role then do you envisage in playing, or that you think the industry should play in addressing the coal availability challenges? On slide 3, I know that you are having electricity, gas, and water portion. If you can also maybe just aggregate that to talk to the issue of electricity itself, and also to indicate if there is your included indirect usage, so that you talk maybe of direct usage to get the total picture. And I think it will also help us if you can provide various scenarios for, especially if you've got a 6% adjustment. Just if you've got a different adjustment, you know, to be able to have a graph that will illustrate as you adjust what the impact thereof is going to be. So you can also do some kind of comparison in terms of how in terms of the definition from our side. And then on the figure that you provided, I'm not so sure of the efficiency that you have already included in the figures that you have, the scope of improving on the efficiency by the mining sector, such that you actually do get the reduction in the demand and not necessarily then getting out of business. And at what level of efficiency are we talking of, and the potential for improvement in terms of efficiency? I think that is going to help us. Thanks a lot, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Nkisi. Mr. Swan.
Thank you, Chair. So in your slide number 5, in addition to unbundling electricity from gas and water that has already been asked, are you able to provide us with a trend of that cost structure over the past 5 years, please, if you can? And then your slide number 7, I think it's quite informative, however, it's not legible, and I'll probably request that you give us a narrative of that particular slide. I think that would assist a great deal. And then slide 8, yes, so you've got 2 scenarios there, the 15% that ESCOM has requested and the 6% that your members are saying they're comfortable with. However, probably if you can just provide a third scenario that lies in between these 2 scenarios. And I think the price elasticity issue has been covered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I just want to check, well, if you could assist us. We've got 2 things that are critical in analyzing the demand. Basically, we take advantage of the fact that you could assist us with economic evidence on top of what we already have. One is that the way that the elasticity analysis is done at this stage, it doesn't really touch on the impact on the demand facing the company. That is the demand facing ESCOM. So ESCOM does not indicate, it just says that no, customers were still buying the same. It doesn't analyze the way that an economist will look at the demand for price elasticity of demand to say, what is the demand that I am facing as an individual firm if I increase the price? So if you could assist with that, because we already know that if you look at the sales for the previous years, it is very clear that the demand, you know, has declined. and maybe if you can give us more analysis on that. And also an analysis now looking forward on any stimulants of the demand. What, in your view, do you think will stimulate the demand? Or will the demand, in your view, stay where it is, or it will drop? I think some of it you touched on it if you look at the number of customers that will move out. So if you can assist us with that, with that part. The second thing that you can assist us with is really the substitutability, which really then if you can assist us with your economic analysis, which goes with sales loss. Because if you experience switching from Eskom's electricity and you go elsewhere for whatever volumes that you are buying elsewhere, and that then translates to a lower output on the part of Eskom, which will then be inefficiency. So if then there's a switching, the issue of the sales loss, you've touched a little bit, but I think a structured analysis on that, we will appreciate it in terms of the sales loss analysis due to switching and due to cutting back in terms of consumption. I think the issue here, from what we've heard, the evidence from Eskom is that with other sectors, they did not see reduction in the consumption. And that, according to Eskom, translates to inelasticity. And if you could then touch really on the reality of the economic or commercial conditions of the captured market, where you don't have an alternative, but you are forced then to buy this electricity. But does that translate to inelasticity such that even if the price were to increase by 50%, that industry will still consume it nevertheless? So we want you to get into that switching and the tipping point of the switching and the sales loss analysis in a structured economic analysis and economic evidence. Mr. Modisa has one point.
Sorry, Mr. Hawk, thank you, Madam Chair. I forgot to ask just one question. You know, if on your concluding slide, you show all the job losses in the different industry sectors and from other commodities, and in fact I tried to add some of them are close to 300,000 jobs. You'll see in Eskom application, and despite what the World Bank is saying, and they've tried to discredit the World Bank in their application, they're not looking at cutting the operations, the size of the business to economic realities. The question that I just need to ask from you is just your views on saving maybe a few jobs within Eskom versus losing 300,000 jobs in the rest of the economy. What is the view of your sector? Because if you think about 40,000 jobs versus perhaps 3,000, and 3 million families getting affected just with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Langenhoven. If you have some of the answers now, you can provide those very briefly, and some of them you can provide to us in writing within 7 days.
Thank you, ma'am. We've been recording the questions. Just on the last one, is our science not a dismal science? How do you compare 40,000 people to 300,000 people? I think this is really the seriousness of the whole situation. We will certainly come back to you, because we spent, the reason why you have slightly different numbers in the subsequent submission that we made is because we went deeper into it. We consulted with our members, and we interrogated the methodologies better, and the expert is actually sitting here with the mathematics and the econometrics. So we will come back to you. That is the only reason. It's not and as you know, we found as well, when you work with this analysis, to do sectoral analysis, you need sectoral information. So you work with input-output data, and then compare to what Eskom is providing in terms of their understanding of who's buying what. Like always, it never ties up exactly with the one with the other. So that's one of the interviewers asked me the other day, but is this a science? I mean, this is as much an art as a science. if I can just, I can't answer all of that, and we will certainly come back to you with all the answers, even if I'm talking about it now. On the forecasts, yes, Eskom did interact with our members, of course individually, not with us as the Minerals Council on its own. I must say, and we have used two of the tables where Eskom gave the upside of what could make it better, what could make the demand higher, and downside. Now, it was interesting to us that the downside was actually much more down than the upside. And I think the slide that I showed you on how we've lost out on the relative to other commodity exporters. Of course, it's not only Eskom. It is a whole host of issues. But the fact of the matter is the sector is in a corner, and we have to adjust. And I mean, just to give a ludicrous example, 2-3 days ago, a sludge dam broke in Brasilia. The iron ore price shot up. Kumba's share price shot up by 7. So it's like the undertaker, someone dies, then he can pay for his school kids. That is unfortunately what is going on. The elasticity of supply, of demand, is a very interesting issue, and we will try and explain it systematically to you. I try to do that. On coal, I think that is quite important to talk about. The minerals the coal part of the Minerals Council has been in intense interaction with Eskom, and I dare say that we are about to solve that problem. There were many issues. There were announcements recently about Eskom planning to invest 12 or 15 billion in the tied mines. Of course, the international situation shifted dramatically. All of a sudden, India is competing with Eskom for steam coal, which wasn't the case that much in the past. Over the longer term, we often use the World Bank forecast of what they see into the future, because if you talk to an analyst that's trying to sell coal shares, then he tells you coal is going to go through the roof. If you talk to someone that wants to sell IPP shares, then it's going the other way. So we're trying to be very even-handed, as middle of the road as possible, and the World Bank, in our view, has no reason to talk it up or down. I think I must stop there. We will certainly give you better. I'm sorry, I apologize for the slide about the cost curves. It is a little bit vague, so you can't see it properly. So we will do that better. Yeah, many thanks. I hope we satisfied.
As you've taken some of those questions which we will respond in writing, you need to just clarify the nature of issues that you engaged with Eskom during the consultation, because what we're looking for the economic evidence on whether or not Eskom did put the question to your sector to say, if we were to increase the price by 15%, would you still continue to consume the same volumes? And whether you are going to switch to others. So it talks again with that substitutability, it talks about the switching. So if you could assist us with that, because I think your answer did not get to that part, because the part of our analysis will be on the 15% or 45% in the next 3 years. Are you still going to absorb that as the industry? That's what we want to understand. And then lastly, if in your analysis you can use the SNP test as a tool to measure price elasticity, a small but significant non-transitionally increase in price. I think that's the main tool for price elasticity. If you can assist us with that.
Thank you very much. I understood that you were asking, did they consult us to ask whether we're going to grow or not? Yes. That's the one part. I don't think 15% was punted saying, will you buy less or more, but we will investigate that. Many thanks. I appreciate your book.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are going to take another presentation from Civics Outreach Platform, SA. I've got the name of Kate Kuman. Kate Kumalo. Do we have Kate Kumalo? Okay, if we don't have Kate Kumalo, I will take a presentation from the member of WECCF, Dom Zodwa Ranyadi. Do we have Dom Zodwa?
Yes.
Okay, please come. Sorry, can somebody assist Dom Zodwa there? Sister Observer, before you start, so which one is the observer? Hold it, Tinga process. Tinga. Okay, I wanna hold. Assistant Observer, yes. Is present at one.
Yes.
All right. Please raise your right hand. Yes.
The 35.
Especially to course. Alright. Sister Observer, ndicela ukwazi ukuba uyafunga uzibophelele ukubana konke oza kuthetha apha izabe iyinyaniso nenyaniso empheleleyo.
Ewe, ndiyafunga.
Alright, ndicela ke utsho igama lakho elipheleleyo nokuba ngabana isikhundla sakho apha kule organization.
Igama lam nguDom Zodwa Ranyadi. Kuma kwi-forum yabomama ebizwa WECCF emele i-Women in Energy and Climate Change Forum.
Right. Sister Dr. uzawukhuluma kunye nomama.
Yes.
Ngicela umama naye asengaphambili. Ngicela umama aphakamise isandla sakhe sasekunene. Sondeze umboko kancinci kumama. Sister Dr. ucela ukunceda umama. Mama uyafunga kwaye uzibophelele ukubana inyaniso izinto zawuthi uzithethe phambi kwale panel iza kube iyinyaniso nenyaniso epheleleyo.
Ewe, ndiyafunga.
Alright, ngicela umama atsho igama lakhe elipheleleyo nesikhundla ke asibambileyo.
Igama lam ndingu-Edna Orange Farm. I-organization ethiwa ngumkhunu. Ndivele ndawo ndiyojunior nabomkhunu. Kunye nabo otatomkhulu nabo makhulu ukuthi ndizobamele. So mna ndingumthunywa entweni.
Alright, urepresenta kulungile. Xa sister uzoqalisa. Bani uqala uthetha?
Okay, so qala uqala ibanga because uthi uzothatha isikhathi.
Mama uthi iqabaqaba nje ezakho.
Ewe, mna igama lam ndingu-Edna Kasenitshilo. Ndithunywa ngabogogo nabotatomkhulu base-Orange Farm. Kule organization esendibhale kuyo apho. Ogogo bathi banesikhalazo mali 15% eka-Eskom imali abanayo, basebenza kanzima, batsala kanzima ogogo nabotatomkhulu kunjalo. Ingxaki ekhona njengathandeki 15% kungenxa yokuba abantwana abasebenzi bahleli emakhaya. Okunjalo futhi sesijonge nabazukulwana bethu sesinceda bona sithenga ukutya left and right. And futhi enye into ebalulekileyo engayitshoyo ukuthi noba silima siyazama ukulima kodwa khona iphumayo. Njengoba yokho iphumayo kuyatsho ukuthi indlala ibholile. Loo nto sisacela Eskom uba makakele nge-15% yakhe. Enye into ngenxa yoguquguquko lwemizwa sivalwa yintoni ngento uba asikwazi ukutya. Funeze siyofika emashop siyothenga khona. And sithenga emashop nje amaxabiso hlebani axhomile. Asifikeleli into ezininzi kwa ukudla oku sithengayo akukho enough. Nake njengangenzenza amandlela ezinye zoba iphile njengento efana nama-recycling. Ndisabuya kodwa ndisathele ngento yesisibonelo esiyimali esingafikelela indawo kuso. Enye into engingatshoyo ngathi sicela u-Eskom akazame ukufuna lamabhiliyoni nakwathini imali sinayo. Akazame ukwenza i-investigation. Azame ukucheck uba imali yakhe noma yalahleka kobani, mhlawumbe ngaloo ndlela leyo angaphumelela. Phinde sicele futhi ukuthi u-Eskom asimcele siyamxela thina singokho sizimbedleke. Asisebenzi indawo singabantu futhi nje ukuhlukumezeka konke oko. Siphinde ndicele futhi ndithi u-Eskom ingathi angaphinda azame ezinye indlela ezokuphehla umbane. Indlela efanelanga kunye nomoya uba ndiqinisekile akekho umuntu omnye ilanga lethu sonke lizathixo. Ngaphandle kwa uzovela komnye emiseni athi ayelanga selinye kamntu ngoku. Siyayibona ngoko le nto. Abantwana bethu baphilile zii-sinus ngale ndawo elamalahle kangangokuba baphila ziipilisi. Thina ke singabomakhulu nale mali yokuthenga isipilisi iye ishokoxeke ingabikho. So kulapho ke sicela khona Eskom phela izobuya ke ngokulanda i-recycling. Mna ke ndisendithethela mna ke ndodwa ke mhlawumbi nomnye ukho ohlukelayo. Mna ndiyarecycle. Ndiyakwazi uphuma ekhaya kungoku mhlawumbi ngecawe ngabo-5 ntambama. Ndisiyaphi? Ndiyaphinda uzentselo ndiba ndingatsha. Ndifuna ukucholachola. Ngexesha ndihlale apho kuzobetha ngo-10 wasebusuku. Ngexesha ndibuyele ekhaya ngothulanja, ndiyakhona uthulanja siyamasi. Apho xa ndiphuma kusekho neenje ezikhongothayo. Sendiyamutha kwisithathiso ngayo kole nto ndisifake impilo yam. So kulapho ke ndicela khona Eskom uba makamele uba mna akukho ndifikelela khona. Ngeli lonke ke ndizama ukuthi ke mna ndimu-Edna njenganombiwo. Eskom wo into endifise inzoka ngoba nempilo yam ndiriskanga. Ngiyabonela.
Siyabonela mama kakhulu sicela sisindokuzodwa sengaphambi.
Ngiyabulisa ukuthi isini lesigqeba sakho sonke. Ngibulisa nabantu abaphakathi kwale ndlu nomnquba kaThixo wasigcina ukuthi sibe lapha. Ngizoqala nje ngokuthi I think in the past weeks on national TV I've seen Ubabu Hade or Utatu Hade saying he apologizes for we community as South Africa for what happens in the previous years. Yes, we do take apology yakhe. Ukuthi siyazi ukuthi kwenzakaleni. But now inkinga ukuthi noma apologize thina we must suffer the consequences ye mali efuna uEskom. Ugogo sekachilo wathi makake uhambe uqale iyo retrieval le mali qale yangahleke singayazi ukuthi ihambe kanjani. And then I think bazothi mase bayitholile and then they come back to us bazofuna a certain percent yokuthi mhlambe bafuna ukunyusa electricity kangakanani. And I think another thing, it's high time ukuthi sike sibe namanye ama companies that generate energy, because if Eskom ngena competition yiyo ke le ayenzayo each and every year we need to come here uNersa as a regulator ukuthi kufanele ukuthi kunyuswe electricity kangakanani. Enye into mina ngifuna ukuthi nje ku-Eskom siyabomama ngithanda unyabomama abaphuma ku different areas, different regions, baya recycle, baya lima, benza ama-beats, benza yonke into, but energy and climate change iyas affect sonke ukuthi noma wenzani, especially abomama, because if umbane ungekho wefanga ukuthi uqala ukuthi uyozama ukuthi uyofuna inkuni uzobasa ukuthi ufuneka kudliwa. Uwefanga ukuthi ubone ukuthi utata umbekela amanzi kuseni ukuthi mhlawumbe ifuya kuma piece job kufuneka ehlambile. So we are the one esisafarayo kakhulu siyabomama. Asithi ukuthi abotata basafari, but abomama yibo because babheke abotata babheke nabantwana. So ingxaki yethu nje yiyo leyo kakhulu. Uthi uEskom ukuthi ufuna i-15%. So njengoba efuna lo 15% uthi for 3 years. Yes, kuzongena lo 15% this year. Next year another 15%, that other year another 15%. So already I get a good 15%. My little yaphela because izobe seyikhuphukile kunyaka ozayo, because I need zonke izinto ziyakhuphuka every year. Kuthi kulo yanyaka futhi kuphinde kuzothi 15% but kuphinde kunyuke ezinye izinto. What about abantu sina third party ukuthi umasipala othenga electricity kwa Eskom abuya zithengisela community. Sinama-shop afana nabo Pick and Pay, Shoprite, ezithengisa i-electricity. Kufanele ukuthi siyothenga kubo nabo kule 15% bazophinde bafake interest futhi angithi ukuthi kufanele ukuthi sithenge. So i-15% kahle kahle ime kuphi lapho, because abantu abazobuleleka yithi thina i-community kakhulu. And nengisuggestion ukuthi if vele njengoba Eskom ethengisa nomhlakasi makube kuqhamuke le third party kube Eskom to community. Essentially, straight to Eskom, mhlawumbe it might become better ngaleyo ndlela, because masithenga ku third party ininzi kakhulu. Kwi-presentation yakhe ngithe mangithi ngiyabheka kakhulu Eskom, some of the slides ngoba si-attend izinto ezifana nalezi siyabona ukuthi ulokhu ephinda izinto bekazipresente in the previous years okwakhe ukushintsha nje ama-numbers ukuthi abanye watshintsha nje ukuthi awele ngapha because if siyakhumbula last year ufune increment ye 19.9%. So now with the other saying of the slides ufuna i-15% again. So nansika enye problem ele kakhulu ngibona ngathi ukhulumela amalahle, because ukhuluma ngama-mines kusile totally which kukuthi bona labantu ba-generator i-energy ngamalahle. So what about renewable energy? Uma asekatshilo wathi kuke kwenziwe mhlambe i-energy ukuthi izogeneratwa ngelanga, akho umuntu owona ilanga ilethu sonke, so that ukuthi mhlambe sikwazi ukuthi sifikelele, because we need i-electricity. We need ukuthi kwezinye kunokuthi kuvulwe namanye amakhampani amanye ama-mines ekuthi mhlambe kwavaliwe. Why bangake benze ama-renewable energy kulawo ma-mines kunokuthi kuloko kucontinue every year kuloko kufuneka inathi i-energy ngamalahle? Hiyo nayo into ukuthi vele kufanele ukuthi manje imali kufanele ukuthi iphume ukuthi thina abantu esingasebenzi, you know, akusukuthi umsebenzi asufune already sesigqibele half a million yabo mawuqala umaketha umsebenzi awukho, but mawuyabasasa uya-apply bazokutshela ukuthi usemncane. So now we don't know where to go. The worst part now, angisacabangeli nami, I'm only thinking about abantwana bami engibazele, which I've got abantwana bayithula ukuthi kule age njengoba bayesikoleni kazi umsebenzi bazokuthola na. We understand. So ukuthi mhlawumbe maybe they might become bazonqeda bazosinceda eziparents, but nabo banama-responsibility wabo. Angeke sirulale ukuthi they must help us ukuthi sithole indawo yomhlakasi.
Fantastic points zakho sisibethe zona.
Okay, I think ngizoma nje lapho, but ilona benithi ngizoba nesikole. Unfortunately ngibe lucky today ngipresente before lunch, because normally do abapresentayo ngiyabona ama-committees apresenta after lunch sekukuthi way before inathi abantu be-Eskom sebahambi. So electricity today bayaziva izikhalo zethu
abahambi bazawaba the last one.
Yeah, I hope so. Esinye isicelo sami sokuthi sicela ukuthi abantu bakwa-Eskom makabe beze community. We belong to community groups, we belong to community organization. Ingxaki nansi mangithi baze ukuthi today, you know, I think there were 5 or 6 of them mhlawumbe abanye vele abazanga they are here. Yes, they've done the presentation yabo ngendlela okay right, but masibabiza to the community they don't come. Into abayenzayo masifuna ukukhuluma no-Eskom sithunyelwa abantu ababheke amabhizinisi wabo ukuthi because they want to put prepaid meters kuma-location wethu okokuqala. And secondly, into esiyifunayo lama-prepaid sesifakele vele ngenkani because akukho nto negotiatiwe nathi, sifakele wona ngenkani siyawasebenzisa-ke, but kuyabonakala ukuthi umzohluphekayo siyabonakala ngokucinya kwezibani, because mangunayo imali yokuthenga i-electricity already iyacima inathi i-electricity. Into thina besiyilwela eSoweto, we wanted inathi i-flat rate okokuqala. If I'm not mistaken, we wanted a flat rate because remember, before 1994, we were paying something like a flat rate, government were apartheid. But besikhona and bekufikeleleka ukuthi siubhadale i-electricity yethu ngendlela efanele, and sikhona ukuthi see one woman to add this by. But now, come after 1994, and then so see a Sobol. And then which is Sobol, the people in the government, I'm sorry to say it, because before Singenem we fought for this Sikulule. They said to the community, stop paying rent, stop paying electricity, so that this is the community sees a winner. No Busa over wait. Massively, and then did they come back to us after 1994? Now from here, see, please, Sinamalo, it's Soweto, it's coming and Soweto, Oguchi Soweto, I'm billions. Do you think if it's in a sea community as Soweto, I think we've got I'm more than 29. I'm bad bit by bit. Do you think if each per household pays a flat rate of 100 rand? I use of course I said a flat rate is 50 rent, and I think that you know what, sometimes night must see how the next to bus logos is coming up to school. If I pose the Mount Battle 100 rand, Minyam, where would have come to Salilai? Who has come here according to tribe in the human? The same as if they are such a good we are going to come and a corner. Now it's called a sick and a scholar that's a follow. So the sort of people are 120, Simini Maria is from a good, and then we come back as flat rate is 100 rand. I don't think nobody will be owing. We understand. So, but we know what they are in business, but it's people before profit. The constitution we've got right to electricity, everywhere, education but every year we must come, this is what it's not that as if we look part-time. Siyafuna patinabo mabajeleze bankwini bufikelele sikhona ukuthi sihlale phansi sikhulumela. I think there are different organizations whom the guy is not much formula sadibana, including mhlambe siqale nabuni abantu benesa ngoba nabo chairperson nani ukuthi if sihlala phansi sikhulumela kanje, how best can we do this? Akusukuthi ngamaphela sifuna ukubhadala, siyafuna but imali efikelela la. Ngiyabonga chairperson.
I want to check with the members. Select clarity questions, not statements. Questions, Mr. Pole, Mr. Mdisa, Mr. Mdisa, Mr. Span. Okay, Mr. Span. Oh, okay. Sisi ngathi babuzule kahle umyalezo wakho ukuthi bamele kahle abomama. But ke uEskom uzwile naye uthatha amanotes uEskom. So it means on the issue of accessibility to communities, Eskom must be visible. Eskom is taking note of that, and then also certain things that the communities may want to get clarity on. So Eskom has heard you on that. Eskom has also heard you on the issue of a flat rate, and Nersa will also avail itself to the extent that communities want to engage with Nersa. We've got people from Nersa, the Nersa team here, that might also come and make some arrangements to meet the communities and doing education and clarity, and also at the time perhaps before the municipality tariffs applications when they come through. So bakhona buvuyelwa phoso bakhona nabo Amanda Mthembu here, I'm mentioning them so that outside during tea break you can meet with them. And also the Brian Sichotla, those are the relevant persons from Nersa side. But that does not replace the role of Eskom. Eskom will stand on its own, Nersa will stand on its own with regards to what it needs to do. Then with regards to the Soweto debt, Eskom, you will respond on that before we leave and clarify those billions that we talked about. You presented them when we were in other hearings. You did not present them today when we were in Soweto. So and then the other issue that we are taking note of is the emphasis really today that people, it is not that they do not want to pay. The issue here is the affordability, the willingness to buy electricity and the willingness to pay at a particular price. It is not to say that we are dictating the price, but we are showing that economic consideration to say the willingness to pay at a particular price. You're putting that as a proposal to Eskom, and Eskom will take that into consideration. This is just to show that all of those key points are important, and we've taken note of them, and Eskom is here. At the end of the day today, it will respond to those. Thank you, Sisi, for your time.
Thank you.
Usisi Ndomzola thina Usisi Kate simduli. Ukhona Usisi Kate? Okay. Usisi Kate is not here. We're taking tea break. It will be for 15 minutes. Please, you are welcome to join us for tea. Come back, being this nice audience here, and listen to other stakeholders. And those who want to present, they've already arranged with Mr. Danzi. Thank you very much.
Wow.